Good morning, everyone. Good morning, advocates, lawyers, and those who have joined us today for this sports law training. It is a very pertinent training as far as especially Uganda is concerned and the sports sector generally. A topic that I think is of the times. Uganda recently hosted CHAN, CHAN 2024, and will be hosting AFCON 2027. Lawyers have always wondered, how do we tap into these opportunities? Where are the opportunities? There are so many things that you've heard about and wonder what exactly is happening. How do we get into this? Because as you all know, in as much as the sport played on the field, behind the scenes many times, there are certain legal machinations that go on in ensuring that event comes to fruition. So the topic is really pertinent. The topic today is from CHAN 2024 to AFCON 2027, tying up the loose ends, the lawyer's role. I am your moderator today, Ivan Ojakol. I'm a partner at Matrix Advocates. And with me, I have a very storied panel of experts who will help us distill this very important topic and for us to be able to go home and with very important takeaways. It's not just a lawyerly panel. Sport is multidisciplinary and is almost across the entire value chain, and that is why we have involved a politician. We have a journalist also. So our program ran from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and we'll have Honorable Geoffrey Kayamba Solo, who is a shadow minister in Parliament, and also MP Bukoma Simbi. And also, I know for a fact that he's a sports agent, so he's very well steeped in the sports industry. He's not a sports agent, but a football agent. We also have a legendary journalist. At the risk of giving him my age, I used to listen to the man in high school, but interestingly, my beard is now grayer than his. Ismail Dakaba Chigongo, who is the head of sport at Nation Media. Is it Nation Media Group or Nation Media? Nation Media Uganda. Yeah, okay, because I know the Nation Media has offshoots right from Kenya. He's had a great career right from radio to TV to print, and I believe many of you have seen him on your screens or read his articles. So he'll be giving us a very vantage point of view, or a very vantage perspective from a sports journalist's perspective, because as you all know, these journalists perhaps have more sporty information than many of us. And a lot of us feed off what they give us. So if they tell us a lie, you go with that lie. If they tell us the truth, it is the truth. So we also have Mr. Ivan Magom. Ivan Magom is one of the greatest rugby players this country has seen. He's the club captain of Pirates Rugby Club, who are the current champions in the Ugandan Rugby League. He has also previously been the captain of the Rugby Cranes. He's also a lawyer, but also importantly, he's a person who has, for lack of a better word, bore the brunt of certain ills that come with sports governance. So it's important that we have his perspective on athletes' welfare and how athletes can be able to benefit from some of these mega sports events that Uganda is now hosting. Thankfully, now we have a lot of infrastructure that is coming up, the likes of Hoima and etc. We also have Mr. Timothy Kaja, an associate partner at Ngoro Mutebi, a leading sports lawyer in this country. I know for a fact that he has also represented a couple of our athletes at the Court of Arbitration for Sport, like Fayed Bayo. So it will be very good to listen to him. And then we shall also have Mr. Andrew Oluka, who's a partner at Moeman Company Advocates. Interestingly, Andrew and Isma, I used to listen to both of them back in the day, but now I look older than them on radio. There's a Radio 1 program called Locker Room, which as an avid listener growing up, but interestingly, the man looks younger than me now. So Andrew, who I believe has been involved in a lot of sports battles over the years, sports law battles, especially in the courtrooms. In those days, if you remember the Uganda Super League and I don't know what else, and Muema Kavenge, etc. So it would be good to listen to him. He will take us through, by and large, the broadcasting and intellectual property rights that come with hosting these mega sports events. Timothy Kaja will tell us about the legal considerations that go into the hosting of such an event. So without much ado, I'll hand over to our dear Vice President of the Uganda Law Society to give us opening remarks, and then we shall take it up from there.
Well, thank you very much, Ivan, our dear moderator for today. Our panelists for today, Mr. Andrew Oluka, Mr. Timothy Kaja, Mr. Ivan Magomu, Mr. Ismail Dakaba Chigongo, who I'm excited to be seated next to, because for those of you who watch sports, I'm an ardent sports fan, and I always watch these programs, and I do believe there's a lot we can learn from his experience. Senior counsel present online, the rest of the members as well. Because of the digital transformation, we're lucky to have these trainings digitally. It simplifies work. You attend from wherever we are. I greet you all a good morning. I bring you warm greetings from the Radical Nuba Governing Council, and extend our sincere appreciation and thank the team for the support we've had so far. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to today's training in sports law, themed from CHAN 2024 to AFCON 2027, tying up the loose ends, mainly focusing on the lawyer's role. I think this is a timely training, it's a timely engagement, because I see this session going to explore for us the role of a lawyer. What role do we have to play in the sports ecosystem, and also highlight vast opportunities available for members, or for the lawyers and the legal practitioners in this rapidly evolving world of sports. I'm sure Dakaba here will tell you how some of us who follow football, I've noticed that most agents of these serious footballers are lawyers in most of these countries, and sometimes when I look at the contracts drafted, how much the agent is earning, and just from a contract, or from moving a player from one place to another, I keep imagining, when shall we get there as Uganda? When can our members or the lawyers seize these opportunities and also begin benefiting from the sports sector, because it's really a lucrative sector. I really do extend my sincere appreciation to our distinguished speakers. This is a remarkable lineup. I see highly knowledgeable people, committed, passionate about sport. One thing I know about sport is it's the passion that drives the rest of the interests. And I see this passion, this dedication in the panelists we have. And you've really allowed to graciously dedicate your time and share your insights with us today. We do not take that for granted, and we do appreciate, we do thank you very much. To our participants, I encourage all of you to engage actively, ask questions, listen attentively, and share the experiences. For some of you have experiences, because I know different people from different areas have different or various experiences they can share with the membership, so that we are able to enhance each other's skills and our understanding of this dynamic field of legal practice. I thank you all once again, and I wish you a very productive session. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's get the ball rolling. We shall start with Mr. Dakaba. Mr. Dakaba, Ismail Dakaba Chigogo is going to address the topic, the subtopic, sports journalist perspective, taking stock of CHAN 2024 and its impact on Ugandan sport, if any. Of course, CHAN 2024 is more or less symbolistic of where I would want to go as far as hosting mega sports events. It's not just CHAN 2024, it could be Rugby Afrique, I don't know, 2030 or World Cup 2050 or something like that. So I believe there are lessons and there are things, there are projections for Uganda sport that have come from this, from hosting of this tournament, and who better than a journalist who interacts with these sports people, administrators and athletes almost on a daily to take us away and give us his perspective and address us on this very, very important discussion. Then from there, I think lawyers can then come in and pick it up from there.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I don't normally get a chance to speak to people in this kind of language because the bulk of the sports people I've interacted with for the past largely 16 years on this job are people who speak a language that is totally different, that has very different syllables from this. But I'm very glad. Thank you to Uganda Law Society for the invitation. In my place, we know lawyers to be people who have lugezi-gezi. So the only lawyer who doesn't have, the only two lawyers who don't have lugezi-gezi is Andrew and Ivan. But that's largely because we watch football and rugby together a lot of the time and spend a bit of time texting on the phone through the night, through the NB and all these other things. So while coming here, I thought I needed to sit down and write and sound very intelligent because I was going to speak to people who are quite intelligent. But I want to speak off cuff because that's what makes it very easy for me. Maybe today, sport and football in particular that we are going to talk about is viewed through statutes, articles. Every time you're discussing something related to sport with the people who run the sport, the next thing they'll throw at you is a statue or some kind of document. Yet, this amorphous thing that is called FIFA, the Federation of International Football Associations, was started by a journalist. He was a writer for a French newspaper, Robert Guerin, way back in the 1900s, early 1900s. But even he, when he got to a point of putting this entire concept together, he invited a lawyer. So eventually, FIFA in its current form was started by two people, a journalist and a lawyer. I think they had the biggest interest in the success of what FIFA would eventually become. Today, maybe it's widely regarded as the richest non-profit making organization. The kind of money they funnel out to their members is obscene in every sense that these days you don't need to go to the World Cup to profit from it. Maybe way back in the 70s and 80s and through the 90s before Sepp Blatter became president in 1998, the benefits that came from FIFA largely went to the teams that played at the top level. That has since changed. And I wanted to give that perspective to drive it to where Uganda now has got some kind of benefit that leads to where we are with the CHAN and the AFCON. Over time, because countries like Uganda would never get this kind of resources from FIFA until Sepp Blatter became president, and no one has served football longer than Sepp Blatter. This is a gentleman who joined the pinnacle of football back in 1975 as a lawyer. Okay, to call him a lawyer for FIFA would be overstretching, but as part of the legal department of FIFA back in 1975, and rose to become president in 1998 after serving for 23 years. Then he made the position his own and eventually was pushed out and has been battling court cases until earlier this year when was exonerated by the Swiss courts. But it's him who changed the outlook of the game and made it global and started to funnel out money to these kind of federations to build the kind of capacity that we see, because it's under him that a federation like FUFA moved out of a rented block in Nakulabye, where the office was next to a pork joint called Nicodemus. For those who understand locations and your Google Maps, you'd know Nicodemus. I don't know where it is. I have nothing to do with pork. But I've been around football very long, from my childhood, from around the age of 6, 7. So that's how long I've been around the game as a fan. So it's because of these resources that FUFA that had been housed in a container in Lugogo in the early 90s, moved to the Winton Road, then Nakulabye, then eventually got a home that they have currently in Mengo, and then also the FUFA Technical Center in Injero. And there's a lot more that is in the pipeline, because I could also authoritatively state that they've since acquired land in Lugazu, where they are waiting for funding from FIFA to help them start with the construction of a training facility. We should be after the next World Cup, because they expect a bit of money from there. So it's this kind of capacity that has pushed our federations to even dream of having tournaments like the CHAN that was played here, because they built capacity over time from being a street organization to being a proper corporate organization. And that's where they've got right now. But quickly, the CHAN in itself was never an end, and Uganda has never requested to host the CHAN. Never. In 2017, I was at the Africa Cup of Nations in Gabon, and when we returned from the CHAN, myself and a few other people, and someone who sometimes I call my friend, but our relationship sometimes veers off friendship, and we go separate ways for months, and then after get back together. The FUFA president, Moses Magogo, told me that he had not seen anything special that Gabon had in 2017 to host the AFCON. So he told me back then that Uganda will host the AFCON in 8 years. At the time, it sounded very distant, and we had a very lengthy argument about it. And I challenged him on one thing, that if you want to host the AFCON here, all we need is to have facilities. How we get to build stadiums, no federation in Africa is able to do that. They do not have the resources, but you need to convince government to get these stadiums. Eventually, because he's largely a bright man, but also a very daring person who loves to take his chances on life, after we had the argument on our way back from Libreville, he called a press conference and told people that we are going to host the AFCON in 2025. At the time, Uganda only had a declining Nambole in terms of infrastructure and nothing else. But sometimes when you are as ambitious as he is, and maybe you're a dreamer, and sometimes the exposure we get, because I've had the opportunity to travel to some of these West African countries, and sometimes you go to Togo, you speak to colleagues who have been to Benin, you go to Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Congo, Brazzaville. You get back home and you're thinking, we're already in a better situation, but we can do a lot better. So the motivation to get to where we are, I would comfortably say, started with one individual who saw that all that Gabon had that we didn't have were stadiums. They also have better roads, because I had a chance to go to a slum in Libreville, and at least the road was tarmac, narrow but tarmac, and there was lighting there. And of course, there weren't restaurants on the street. The hotels were not very good, and they are very few and limited. So from that conversation, FUFA set out an ambitious plan to host the AFCON. As the story goes, Moses Magogo spoke to Tanzania. The Tanzania FA president at the time is called Wallace Karia. He's been on and off as president there. And then eventually, Nick Mwendwa. Nick Mwendwa was FA president in Kenya at the time. Nick has had his troubles with the law and siding with the wrong government. That's why he's no longer in office. But he was he joined much later. In the end, because Moses Magogo got into the parliament and is member of parliament for Budiope East, he gained the kind of access that not many ordinary Ugandans have as MP. And of course, he doesn't live in a place where Ivan and Andrew live, because he lives in Nakasero, which is a few steps from State House. And you know why he lives in Nakasero. I don't want to go into that. But because of that access, he got to the president and he convinced President Museveni. And I remember he told me that when he told the president that we can host the AFCON, the president asked him, "What do you want from me?" And he listed his demands. We need an airport. Of course, he knew the airport was already under construction in Hoima. We need another stadium, and we need Nambole to be rehabilitated. Eventually, the president heeded to these demands. Of course, I'm told these were sent to the Minister of Finance to look through the cost and everything, and how much time Uganda would need. This was back in 2022. And at the time, the bidding for 2025 AFCON was on. And Uganda, who had now brought in Tanzania and Kenya to the table, because when Moses Magogo spoke to President Museveni, he did not have the power to speak to the president in Tanzania or the one in Kenya. Only President Museveni would get him there. So he tells me at the time when he was in State House, and he felt he had convinced the president, and he thought he was leaving the president an assignment to call the president of Tanzania and Kenya. President Museveni told him, "Let me call them now while you're here, and you explain to them, because I don't understand everything that you've told me, but you're the person who has initiated this." And immediately, the president picked the phone and reached out to President William Ruto. And it took him about 30 minutes for Ruto to get onto the line. And he told me he had to wait about 5 hours for Samia Suluhu, the president of Tanzania, to return the call, because I think she had been out of State House on the switchboards that they use. And then eventually, that's how this entire idea was conceived. So Uganda, which was supposed to bid for 2025, realized there was no time, and they had to bid for 2027. Yet the documents, I got a chance to look at the initial documents for the bidding, and they had 2025. But they had to be switched and put a 7 instead of 5, and that's how we got where we are. So the long and short is that when Uganda eventually won that right to host the AFCON, CAF was very guarded on the ability of this region to host, because remember, this region has never hosted any big tournament. Every time it's been given to Kenya, Kenya were given the rights to host the AFCON. In 96, they failed. They were given the rights to host the All Africa Games, they failed. They've eventually hosted the Under-20 Athletics Championships and a few other events, but we do not have that expertise. Of course, Rwanda has hosted the CHAN back in 2016, but CAF did not know our abilities. So, the president of CAF, Dr. Patrice Motsepe, visited Uganda, I think in 2025, and went to State House. And that is where this entire idea of hosting the CHAN eventually comes up, because CAF did not want to look bad in front of the world in case the AFCON failed. So Patrice Motsepe offered the CHAN to not FUFA or the FA president in Kenya, Tanzania. He actually offered it to President Museveni and told him, in order for the country to look good when the AFCON comes here, please also host the CHAN. That's how eventually it was in Uganda. Eventually should have happened in March of 2025 and then was postponed and eventually happened much later in the year. That was 2025 because there were things that we had not done very, very well as a country. I may not be very good at looking at documents. You guys would be the ones who are good at that because you have to go through all these kinds of documents that have been signed. And I bet all of you get to look at the Gazette every month. Sometimes I look at it just to giggle at how people are changing names, how people are quitting marriage. Those are the pages that interest me. And sometimes when I see advocates, this one has been given, has been approved, then I read the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs has granted a church in my village in Idudi the rights to conduct marriage that will be recognized by government. But after that, there's been a lot of work that, because some of these things have had to be approved in cabinet, to have a CHAN here, and then to gazette these committees and to allow them to do business on behalf of Uganda and all these legalese. So at the time when the tournament was initially passed, I remember asking the minister, Peter Ogwang, that what is the legal protection? I even don't know where it came from because we're in Luganda asking what's a legal protection. And then he told me, no, these things are handled by cabinet, not in the press. Of course, a few weeks later, he comes out and says everything that was needed had been gazetted. Then eventually, I had to go and look at the Gazette, and this time I wasn't looking for people dropping marital names or all the other things. I was looking out for the things that were football related. And eventually, the CHAN had to happen. But finally, from a journalist perspective, I've given you a bit of a journey of where we've come from and how we get to where we are. And I'm personally very, very excited about the AFCON in 2027. But one of the things I noticed during the CHAN is that for all our inadequacies, and our society has quite a number of them, these days I see one of your members, Councillor Daudi Mpanga, and I was watching his podcast, and some of the things it talks about how unsophisticated our society is and sometimes very unserious. I thought for the CHAN, for all our impurities, and sometimes football or sport is a representation of society because the way we play is sometimes the way we act. I love to refer, for example, to the way DRC play their football, to Lingala. When you get into a very serious moment, a Congolese player will dribble and get out of the pitch, and they lose possession and concede. And sometimes if you love your Lingala when you're dancing, while you're serious, you drop a step and almost feel like you're falling, and it's part of the dance moves. For all our seriousness, I thought we did very, very well. First of all, one of the most important things that we had to do was to get people to Nambole. And that we did. I think everyone in their capacity. I remember a few days before the CHAN started, Moses Magogo called a few media people to funnel out adverts to all these media houses to help the tournament, because many of you might have heard there was a bit of laxity. The tournament was coming, there wasn't much movement. You would even have imagined that Nambole would have had 10,000. In the end, we had 40,000 almost for every game. At least Ivan was there watching some of the games. I don't know whether I was there for football reasons or for anything else, but at least I got a chance to see him. I thought that was very important. I thought we also had all the other bases covered in terms of any eventualities. The use of the UPDF helicopter, the police helicopter, to have Mulago and IHK ready in case there was a problem at the stadium and someone had to be evacuated. We have an issue with traffic to get teams to and from the stadium. We do not have any reports of any anti-doping violations because that's also very critical. In terms of all the things that we had to do well, I thought as a country or as a region, that includes Kenya and Tanzania, we did very well. Except I don't think Kenya and Tanzania got the kind of crowds that they should have for the tournament. I also felt most of the suppliers that had been contracted by government delivered on their mandate. And I'm happy to report that I've spoken to some of them, not as the person who carries their demand notes, they were paid. That's also, maybe one of the people on the forum might claim that they are representing a client who has not been paid for the CHAN. But at least I'm very much aware that they were paid late October, early November. Yeah, because I've shared with some of them. Of course, there had been issues with some of the money. Who handles the money? I know the people in Mengo wanted to manage a lot of the money, and there was a war because government insisted that they hold the money themselves, and the Minister of Education and Sports did not want to be involved. So they sent that money to National Council of Sports, which is a regulatory body for the sector, and the ones handling all those payments. So what we learned overall is the fact that we can actually do these tournaments. The initial plan, just to emphasize, for example, was to build a stadium in Lira for the AFCON. But because of the airport in Hoima, that was shifted, and we've seen the stadium in Hoima is done. And the stadium in Lira, while has been delayed for some months, and that's largely because suppliers were owed money. Suppliers to the contractor, I think the contractor in Lira is called Samco. Samco is an Egyptian company. They are slightly poorer than the company that has been doing Hoima, because the guys who have been doing Hoima, who are Turkish, Suma, do not need money to do the work. You give them a contract and they are certain they will get paid. They'll do the work and demand from government. The guys in Lira have had challenges because they wait for payments from government, then they go on with the construction. And I know because the releases for this financial year did not come until around October, there was no construction that happened in August, in July, August, and September. And by the time that happened, some very intelligent supplier went to a law firm and took them to court to demand their payment. But I know that has been sorted, and the construction has since resumed. But those delays are going to happen every now and then. But I think this is where the guys in the legal field can help a lot. How do you push, for example, government to pay? Because that has been a challenge over time. Even during the CHAN, people supplied and were demanded to deliver certain things, but the money did not come till after. Yet some of these things that are required to run the tournament must be in place prior. So there's a lot of stuff that we do not yet do well. Yet the CHAN is the smaller event. Not many of us can even remember the players who played in the tournament because we do not watch the Tanzanian league or the Gambian league or these kind of places. But can you imagine if Mohamed Salah is here and so is Brian Mbeumo? The last time he was here, no one noticed. Everyone wanted Onana. But now Brian Mbeumo will be the biggest thing, perhaps, if Cameroon are drawn in a group that allows them to come to Kampala. Unfortunately, these days, the other team that used to have a lot of African players does not have any. So maybe we'll not be very excited after Thomas Partey left the club and went to Villarreal. So I think there is going to be even more services are going to be required for the AFCON. One of those I envisage beyond the in accommodation is going to be anything beyond the hotels. Do people, for example, in the Airbnb business need even to sign contracts with some of these clients they are getting? Because when I was in Birmingham, maybe the legal regimes are different, or societies are a lot different. We had to sign a contract for 2 weeks just to use someone's apartment. Yeah, yeah, and that bound us to be able to pay. Of course, it was relatively cheap. Yeah. Even if there was many of us sharing this apartment, but I can imagine something like that. I want to rent out my house for the AFCON and go to Idudi for that duration, which is a month, and throw the children in boarding school. Will this Nigerian pay me just in case they use my place? Those kind of small things. In the end, some of us will be more interested in what happens on the pitch because we want to go to radio and sound a lot more intelligent that we saw the reason why the coach took off a defender for a striker. Those are things that interest us, but the other things that happen in the paperwork, Andrew and Ivan are better than me at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ismail, for a very eloquent submission. I don't know if he has missed out some controversial things that he wrote about, or his paper wrote about in the paper during the course of CHAN, but we shall forgive him for that. A couple of very important things have come out. Of course, clearly he has pointed out some opportunities that could come with, now that CHAN is done with AFCON 2027. For a lawyer, he has mentioned things around infrastructure, that could, of course, bring in aspects of construction law for construction law practitioners, accommodation. He mentioned contracts, among others. He talked about legal protections, among others, which that will be for Mr. Kaja to discuss further. But for me, I'm very, very, as far as housekeeping is concerned, I'm unfortunate in not seeing the Q&A section, but if our organizers could help us with that. So if you have a question, or if you have an inquiry, you post it in the Q&A section and not in the normal chat section. But if that's not available, then you can post it in the chat section. So if you have a question, you post it you post it there, then perhaps you can address it later or even now. I'm seeing already one has been posted. For me, my question to this will be around this cultural issue that he talked about. And I know it is beyond just sports, because he talked about society. We gave the example of the DRC and how they are as people and how that translates into sport. How do we develop this culture? Do you have an idea? Do you have, because beyond just the culture of us being Ugandans and getting more serious with our lives and being more organized, how do we develop that serious sports culture? Do you have any clues on how that can be achieved going forward in order to enable us tap into the dividend that will come with sports?
I've always felt that the challenges of Ugandan sports, and you can widen them, summarized for me in four things. One, infrastructure. We do not have a lot of the right infrastructure. There's been a tremendous improvement in that area, just with Hoima and Lira. Two, funding. And this is not only government, but even the private sector. I've never understood why a company cannot split up their budget to support a sports team that is going to get mileage in the media and all these kind of places, but prefer to advertise for billions every year. There's a lot of money out there that is being spent by companies in advertising. But we all know that Ferrari do not run a single advert anywhere in the world except for their Formula One car. And these things for me are very basic. When you watch sports in other societies, especially in the UK, even the local pizza store or the local ice cream joint in Dublin does sponsor a local team. And this does not mean that they are spending a lot of money, but they see sports as an opportunity to connect with their communities. And I felt also funding is the second area. Not only the sponsorship, but also sometimes the pay. When sometimes sports will only make the front page because players are owed money or have not been paid what were promised. Andrew Lucas, he has been part of cases like those where players are owed money. Number 3, I think there is administration. Sports inherently has been run by volunteers in the sense that after I'm done doing my business at my hardware shop or selling my maize, then I choose to be a president or director of sports, of a sports team somewhere, or if I'm a bursar of a school, then I'm the one who chooses who is recruited. So administratively, sport has not yet built a lot of capacity. I'll give you a basic example that last week there was an election in the Uganda Cycling Federation, whose president has been president of that federation since 1991. You can read about him, Samuel Muwonge Mahaba. That he's got to a point now where the federation is run by his family. The daughter is involved and a few other things. There is another federation called weightlifting, run by a gentleman called Salim Musoke. This I've interacted with because I know his children. He's been in charge of this federation so long that his children are the only beneficiaries from the Olympic scholarships that come with those, and at some point has taken his son to compete at an event where his other son is the coach. And this, I don't speak as a rumor monger. I was with them at the All Africa Games in 2019 in Morocco, in Rabat, and we shared a hotel. One son was a competitor, the other was the coach of the competitor, and the father is the president. These challenges with administration do not make sport very attractive, because if this is what you're selling and there's competing demands. When I was raised in the 90s, we waited for the AFCON, waited for the World Cup, and that was it. But now you're competing with crusades. There is a church on every corner, on every street corner. You're competing with a concert every 2 days, even if you do not understand the music, all this bubblegum music. So if you want to sell sports, the administrators have to style up. And I felt that is a major challenge. The other, and I think also very critical, is Ugandan society. Many of us who are tuned in maybe would love for our children to become lawyers. I don't know how many of us would choose for our children to be in sport, because society in itself has to choose a direction it's going to take. Not if your child is playing sport, you're bound to take away the soccer boots so that they can concentrate in school. And that is how all of us parents think about sport as it is. Recently, one of my colleagues who is now, I don't know whether he's finished his law school, Leon Senyange, heavily involved with motorsport. He's actually the person who first introduced me to motorsport. Was telling me that his father, after following the story of the under-17 national team at the World Cup, told him to take Leon's son to an academy because the father had read in a newspaper that all these kids come from these academies, El Cambio in Masaka, Bull Junior Team, Vipers Junior Team. And when Leon texted me and told me, can you imagine the old man? Because I've known Leon for the past 23 years, since 2002. Can you imagine the old man says, I should take, he told me son's name, to an academy so that he can go to the World Cup. And Leon was laughing. Because to his father, who was what? I think he was a doctor at Mulago for so many years. Now he starts to view sport as something that is, you can imagine how those stories change the narrative. So for me, one of the things when Ivan asks about how we can change, I think it has to start with us as society, parents especially. Parents play a very critical role. When I read the story of the former Arsenal, Chelsea, and England left back, Ashley Cole, sitting on a train every other day with his mother to go to training, those things warm your heart. I can imagine if his mother and Ashley Cole grew up in one of the most impoverished neighborhoods of East London, which has a lot of black people. If his family did not have that kind of support system, he would not be there. Maybe some of us drop our children at a swimming club, at an academy, but do we ever sit around and watch them play? Do we ever speak to the coach? Do we ever point out what they haven't done well and what they've done, what they've done well and what they failed to do? I think society, for me, it has to start with the family setting. Maybe the CHAN has changed the perception. The Under-17 World Cup has changed the mind of a few people about what they think about football and their children being involved with it. Maybe the AFCON will do that. One of the things I did not like, for example, about the CHAN that I did not mention is that games were played at night. Yet you have children. I'm really hoping that during the AFCON in 2027, we have games that start on a Saturday at 3 p.m. Let's pour our primary school kids into that, and maybe one of them will get inspired. One of them will see something that warms their heart and aligns with their passions, and they'll get involved with sport thereafter. It has to start somewhere. You can imagine if Stephen Kiprotich had not won that gold at the London 2012 Olympics, there would never be a Joshua Cheptegei. There would never be a Jacob Kiplimo. But just because of the success of one man, who now these days has his face is a bit round, yeah, is a bit like mine and Ivan's, was in much better shape in 2012. Of course, when you meet him now, it's a lot different. But because of Kiprotich, I've had a chance to go to Kapchora. In the aftermath, you'd find kids running, and now there's a lot more athletes. Of course, none of them has become as good as Joshua Cheptegei yet, but can you imagine if we do that for the next 50 years? Ethiopia, as a country, for example, was changed by one man, Abebe Bikila. He goes and wins Olympic gold in Tokyo more than 50 years ago in barefoot. Was barefooted at the time. Can you imagine what Abebe Bikila did for that country? And he died very, very young because there wasn't money being made out of sports, and he got sick and died, I think, of pneumonia. But more than 50 years later, I think all of us here have heard of at least one Ethiopian athlete. If you haven't heard, at least write Gabriel Selassie. Yeah? Because one man goes and does something that warms the entire country's heart, and now everyone from Ethiopia is an athlete. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Isma, two interesting contrasts as far as leadership is concerned. It talks of one administrator, though Mr. Ochiti Samuel seems to disagree. One administrator called Mr. Magogo, who pushed for CHAN almost on his own volition. And then on the other hand, you have the weightlifting and cycling administrators who are really for lack of a better word, or on their own frolics. At this point, thank you very much, Isma. The many things that you've pointed out, and perhaps we shall come back at the end. But also importantly, the power of hosting these events and organizing them and participating in them as far as changing, as far as the paradigm shift is concerned, especially in the minds of you parents out there who think your children can only be lawyers, shows you that sport can actually be lucrative and can be a great career for your children through these events. At this juncture, we're going to go to Mr. Timothy Kaja, who's going to address us on what the legal considerations go into hosting a sports mega event like CHAN or AFCON are. And especially because ISMA seems to have set the tone very well for us. And in addressing that topic, Kaja, there is a question that came through from Prosi earlier. I think it's more of a legal question, and you should be the one to address it. You or Mr. Oluka later. You will see the question, and perhaps at the end I'll read it for you. So after that presentation, you'll address that question. But also importantly, some of the questions that Isma asked, what is the legal protection? That one was to Honorable Guang. And also he talked about the fact that Mengo and NCS were fighting over the money. And for me, that points to one question. Who's in charge of sport? Who's in charge of events like AFCON and CHAN? There's a governance question there. So, Mr. Kaja, but Mr. Kaja is in Abuja. If people think there's no money in sports law, shows how sports lawyers are enjoying themselves. The money is in Abuja and is online. So, Kaja, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Ivan. Can you confirm that you can see and hear me?
We cannot hear you. I don't know what the issue is.
Oh, sorry. Any better? Let me first try.
Perhaps it's an issue from our side. Is it volume issue?
Ivan, any better?
Better.
All right. I just turned off my video. I thought it's about my bandwidth. Let me see. Can you see me too?
Yes, we can see you.
All right. If any, because I'm in Abuja, where I'm not in full control of my internet, I may turn off my video as I do the presentation so that you can stick with me. Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, council members, our dear guest Isma there, and Honorable who's yet to join us. I had Isma mention Leon. Leon is with me here in Abuja, where we are trying to work on training the next crop of sports lawyers on the continent. But it's very, very good to be here with you. Let me just try to share my screen. If probably the admin can help me, because there's someone who's sharing a screen. If the admin can help me get off the screen sharing so I can be able to share mine. All right. And Ivan, can you confirm me that the screen is being shared?
Yes, we can see the screen. I don't know if you can. Okay, that's better now.
All right. Yes. Once again, thank you for being with us this morning, and I'll be taking you through the legal considerations that we have to pay attention to while we are looking into preparing or hosting a major sports event. Of course, the theme is bias in favor of football, but we'll just try to be as wide as possible, because we know we've hosted 2 series of Rugby Afrique. We want to have many more events in Kampala, so it will be a bit wider than the football that we all know and love. Yes, like Isma walked us through, the first, how this all starts is that you have to present a bid, and this is in line with majority of the statutes, if not all statutes that govern the world of sport. So you have to present a bid for a certain year. Of course, you have to follow that sports disciplines calendar and know when you want to prepare the bid. The bid may be presented jointly. That means that you could have other hosts, as we have the Pamoja bid currently, and also as the forthcoming World Cup is that you could have more than one host have bidding, more than one country bidding to host a major sports tournament. And in there, when we say country, because sport is wider, and one of the interesting facts is FIFA having more members than the United Nations General Assembly. At times, it may not be a full country, but it could be a territory. The closest example back home is Zanzibar. So you can look at you may hear of a name that is not seen as entirely as a country per se, but it is recognized as a sports territory depending on the sport discipline. And in some cases, the best example would be the Commonwealth Games. It's just cities. It's not actually the entire country that is hosting the event, but it's a given city. And we'll have examples of Glasgow, have the examples of Beijing. So you see that at times the bids may not be presented by a country, but merely a city, depending on the permutations in that given sports discipline. And preparing those bids is kind of, or is fairly something that is not binding. It's just negotiations. So it's negotiations, and you're making your case, or you're selling the dream that you are the best placed to host that major sports tournament given the circumstances. And in there, what the practice has grown up over time is that you may need, as a lawyer, what you need to do is that some countries or some cities will want to use a big face that is better known for sport in their country. In the likes of David Beckham, at times even they could be not so sporty faces, but at times you may engage someone who would be like the face of your bid. And at times, especially we look at the countries in the Middle East, initially countries were using people from their own countrymen or countrywomen, but currently you could see that countries in the Middle East are using global superstars to come and be the face in them presenting these bids, because these are negotiations and you're swaying people to agree with your bid. So you might need a face. And as a lawyer, you could be the person who's negotiating the contractual terms of that face, who may be publicly known as the ambassador for the bid, and who could be, like I said, your countryman or countrywoman, or even someone who's not part of the country, but a face that is sellable in the given sports discipline. And the people who make the decision, averagely, it is the executive committee of the given sports discipline and organization. Let's say, for example, if you're to take a look at the AFCON, it is the CAF Executive Committee. They're the ones that make the decisions. One of our countrymen, Dr. Don Lukari, who has just been newly elected as the chairperson of the Commonwealth Games, one of the things that they had to do first is, as a new executive committee, to decide where the next Commonwealth Games would be. So you must make sure that the persons who are making the decisions are actually the persons in line with the statutes of that given federation that are empowered to make the decision on who will be hosting that tournament. And this is very, very important for Uganda, because we've just been through a turbulent time with the league, because one of the central positions is that the persons who are making the decisions to change the format by then may not, in line with the statutes, may not have been the rightful persons empowered to make that decision. So you must make sure that the people making the decisions are empowered by the statute to make that decision. And from what we've seen from experience, one thing to safeguard against those people is corruption. If you remember the Sepp Blatter saga and the US losing some bids to the likes of Russia and some other countries, that the US tried to stamp out this vice of corruption, probably not so successfully. But if there are corrupt tendencies that influence the decisions of the executive committees in making the decision as to who is to host that tournament, then there could be trouble. And in sport, we have what we call sports crimes and crimes in sport. So it may not only be a sports crime. That means that you're acting in breach of the statutes of that federation, but also may be a crime in sport. That means that the ordinary laws of the country, especially the laws against corruption, may be then brought in to bring those persons into order. So if you're working for a federation or an association, you must warn the executive committee not to deter from any practices that may be linked to corruption, because that could result into repercussions for them individually, but also that is bad press for the given tournament. Yes, like I said earlier, the bidding is really non-committal, it's non-binding, but after the practice is that after you've won the bid, then you have to pay what would be the equivalent of a commitment fee. And here, for lawyers, we know that many countries are sovereign. That means that you cannot ordinarily drag them into courts of laws or even different international tribunals. But because the federation was seeing that, including the likes of our neighbors, Kenya, that you could grant the last minute, the country would pull out. That would cause chaos for the participants, but also then there are issues with the contract. There could be issues with the sponsors, especially the ones holding the broadcasting rights, as to what is the timing of the event, where will it be held at? Because if someone has planned to broadcast the event from Uganda, it's not by such a that they could then change, probably take it to Kinshasa in the DRC. So those concessions would come in, especially with your sponsors, if the persons who undertook to host a tournament do not end up hosting that tournament. So the target is that countries are paying commitment fee. These are the monies of that the association or the federation would use to compensate or to indemnify themselves from any legal repercussions that may come out of you not honoring your bid that has been granted. For AFCON, I think the total should be 90 million spread across 3 countries, making it 30 million US dollars. For Uganda, that I think could come about 110 billion Uganda shillings, depending on how the dollar behaves. So if you pay, although the bid won't be committed, but if you pay that commitment fee, then chances are that if you don't go and host that tournament, you could end up losing that money. So as a lawyer, you want to be alive to the documentation that is involved, and we'll see some of the possible mitigating factors later in the presentation. Then the next one that we should look at, already highlighted, is the infrastructure. The infrastructure is key because often these leagues have to be, you're hosting a number of teams or countries that are coming into your city or your home country. So you must have the infrastructure and the necessary frameworks, let's say the hospitals, the roads, the airports that have already been mentioned, to accommodate the influx or the numbers that are going to come in, but also to be able to support also you're continuing, because you already have a population back home, but you're going to add. So there's a bit of infrastructure pressure because you have a population back home. If let's say if you visit Mulago Hospital right now, there will be of course patients, but again you're going to have an influx of persons coming in for that tournament. So you need to be comfortable that the infrastructure that you have is able to support your local population and the influx of the numbers that are going to come in. And most importantly, for this part of the world, East Africa, what we lacked, I think, heavily was the sporting infrastructure. But what we can see across the region is that we are erecting good fairly good infrastructure for our standards, and the Hoima City Stadium is one thing that we probably can be comfortably proud of, that it is up and running. So we need to put up this infrastructure, but not only limited to sport, but also the other kind, the roads, the hospitals, they're very key, and of course the airports if these teams are to play in a given city. So because they don't want to waste the time and the energy in moving on our roads, probably somewhere that could take probably and an hour could take multiple hours. So to avoid that, that's why you need an airport close by to be part of your infrastructure docket in hosting that tournament. But also peripheral to that infrastructure, the human rights concerns, these became more evident from the just completed Qatar World Cup, that of course you want to have this infrastructure up first, but now as international federations and associations are alive to the human rights situations that underlie the erecting of these structures. In Uganda, we had some disturbing stories, especially when the UPDF took over the construction of Nambole. There were reports about the UPDF soldiers beating up people in the neighborhood and even the workers who are on those sites for one reason or the other. But those are actually one of the concerns on the back end that CAF was raising, because these reports circulated into media. Some of the stories were being run on air and in the press. So if you have any concerns, if you have any issues regarding human rights, often the key sponsors of those tournaments do not want any bad press from what would be an ideal opportunity for them to grow their brand. And that bad press often comes from the tournament. And you'll see if probably just maybe a little not so on the topic, but if you look at the example of the pressure that Arsenal Football Club went through by having Visit Rwanda on their sleeves, it was because mainly the sponsors were pushing back on what they thought was not the best human rights situation. In the best human rights situation in if you look at the relations in between Rwanda and the DRC and the Goma area. Happy that there is look to have signed some kind of agreement yesterday at the White House. But there are those concerns that how can we be funding Arsenal, supporting Arsenal, and yet Arsenal is also receiving money from someone who may not, or from a regime that may not be squarely and fairly upholding human rights standards. So it's the same discussion that would come through. The tournament host will have Total with the chance. So Total will be asking, how can we be giving you money for you to host a tournament on the back on the back of human rights violations, especially if there is threat to life and limb? That is not something that was welcome. For Qatar itself, they were concerned that the people who are putting up this stadium so fast and beautiful were being worked under the heat for long hours, and some of them were reportedly passed on while on site. So you want to be alive that when you're putting up this good infrastructure, we do not engage in any form of human rights violation, because the sponsors will then pull out or push back. The other thing that you have to also be alive to is sustainability. Sustainability, of course, you're looking at the stadium, because when you're putting up the stadium, of course, you're looking at a tournament like the forthcoming AFCON, but you have to ask yourself, of course, now green is the key. What is the carbon footprint from erecting the Hoima City Stadium? What have we done to minimize the wastage and the environmental impact on that will be coming out from putting up such a great facility? So these are things that you have at the back of your mind. Again, it goes back to the sponsors who would push back, and also some of the monies that run these associations are pegged to such conditions that we'll give you this money, but we want you to be carbon neutral, want you to be as green as possible. So there's this concept that is coming out about green stadiums. It's not something that at least from my research that was central to putting up the Hoima City Stadium, but currently many associations and federations would want that if you're putting up any stadium to host an event that they're supporting, you are alive to green, and of course also safeguarding the environment from any repercussions that may come out from setting up such an art piece. Then very close to that is the concept of what they call the white elephants, is that you could put up a very good stadium somewhere, let's say in Hoima, that would be used for AFCON, but after AFCON, what next? That is a big question. Will that stadium be used again? Will it be abandoned? We have the capacity to fill it. And because of those questions, you see that probably you may wonder why, capacity-wise, why Hoima may be smaller than Nambole, yet it's our latest kid on the block. It's one of those concerns because initially people would just look at having a big stadium that will probably have 90,000 people for the final, but then you ask yourself after the final, who's going to fill that stadium? So you have to have those questions. That's why the numbers then would go low or a bit low, but again, the purpose for all the sports discipline that can be accommodated by the infrastructure then will be the construction will be alive to that. That's why you see that we now have a multi-sports complex where it's not only football, because then after football, what next? But now, let's say if there's no football, there's basketball, there's volleyball, there's swimming, all these disciplines at a lower number, that it does not go to waste immediately after the tournament. Another point also to look out there is access and the PWDs. Of course, all the persons that with special needs persons, is that you must put up this stadium having all persons in mind. The children, persons that needs with special needs, they should be able to access these stadiums. Otherwise, if you put up a stadium, let's say if you look at if you've been to our Nambole, if you do not use the VIP wings and everything, of course there were improvements that were made before the CHAN, but before that, you know, the staircases at Nambole, they're very, very high. So if you look at if you ask yourself, let's say if I'm an ordinary Ugandan who has special needs, and probably I'm not paying the VIP ticket, how easily can I get into that stadium? Those are questions that you have to ask at the end of the day. If you go into the washrooms, for those who have attended some games at Nambole or who are there at the CHAN, and it's probably it's half time, you see the numbers at the washroom. So you have to ask yourself, if there is a person with special needs, how easy is it for them to access these washrooms? Those who have been at the Lugogo Arena, there where we just had the beautiful basketball finals, you ask yourself, if you find that people are piling up to use the washrooms at halftime. So if ordinary people, let's say probably who have no special needs, are filing up for those many minutes, then you should ask yourself, what about a person with special needs? What will it take for them to use the washrooms? And of course, when you look at the nature, you look at the height of those washrooms, especially for the gents who may want to use them while standing, and ask yourself, if I was a person with disabilities, how would I be able to go about that? Now, the other thing that we should be alive to, I haven't been to the Hoima City Stadium, but hopefully they took that into context. Then, lastly, on that is the naming rights. It is, I think here locally, the only example that we have is the Philip Omondi Stadium. So you will find that you go into a stadium and the FIFA is facing a lot of this backlash in the United States, is that you will find a stadium that already has a name of a sponsor who took it up probably for a decade or 5 years. But this sponsor has not paid to be a sponsor of the World Cup. So the question would be, how will you refer to that stadium without balancing the interests of the sponsors of the tournament hosts, but also not violating the interests or the rights of the person who paid money before the tournament, that the stadium be called that name? Like have the, for example, now, like I said back home, the example we have is the MTN Philip Omondi Stadium. So MTN is already on that. MTN it has the naming rights for that stadium, and if you enter, there's a lot of MTN and the Philip Omondi Stadium. So if it was to be like supposed to be used as a training ground, but MTN is not a sponsor of the AFCON, so how would you officially refer to that stadium? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself. And at times in the US, they have had to renegotiate for carve-outs in the naming rights, so that you can pay the person or the company that paid for the naming rights to allow you to change the name of that stadium for the duration of the tournament. And at times, if that fails, tournaments have had to be moved from some stadiums because they were not able to find a compromise between the person who has the naming rights and the sponsors or the organizers of a given tournament. So as a lawyer, you also have to be alive to those rights and how to navigate around them. Then the other thing is immigration. We already mentioned about the influx of the numbers. So when you're hosting these major tournaments, you'll have athletes coming in, officials coming in, workers coming in, and volunteers coming in, the fans pouring in. So you have to ask yourself, like where now, if you have people are now, we are multi-hosting as a region, East Africa, how are we going to manage the immigration process? Will someone have to apply for a visa in Uganda? Then when they're going to watch a game in Tanzania, they apply for another visa. Thing and requiring a visa, but you have to ask yourself, how are these people going to come into the country? Are they going to apply for multiple visas? Can we make arrangement for one visa? You have to ask those questions because they will have the numbers, but it will be on you to manage how these people easily coming. And for you, one of the things that you undertake while bidding, that you undertake that you will be able to accommodate these numbers as well of the athletes, fans, and workers. And also the forthcoming World Cup bears a good example. In Trump 2.0, immigration has been central to the operations of Trump 2.0. That is Donald Trump, the current president of the United States of America. And he has banned several countries or persons from several countries from accessing the US. He's reviewing visas of several countries. So you must ask yourself, what will happen to the people to the fans, the players, officials that are coming from those countries? The best example is Haiti. Before Haiti, earlier in his presidency, when the President Donald Trump put a ban on Haiti as immigration, so it's very difficult, if not impossible, for you to come from Haiti and enter the United States. But just a few weeks back, Haiti qualified for the World Cup. So now the question now, how will the athletes get into Haiti? How will the officials of Haiti enter that? How will the fans from Haiti deal with that scenario? Will they then waive? Will they waive their right to support their countries? And will the country, the Federation of Haiti, what will be their reaction if you're going to tell them that you'll have to play but without fans? Isn't that similar to a punishment? That because one of the punishments in the world of football is that you can play a game behind closed doors. What that means that you don't have fans in the stadium, similar to the COVID time. So by just operation of the presidential or executive orders of President Donald Trump, it means that Haiti will literally play those games behind closed doors because they will have no fan that is allowed in. That is if in case the players and the officials of Haiti are allowed to come into that country. So you have to liaise as a hosting country or as hosting nations to see how you're going to manage the immigration questions to ease, to make it seamless for the fans, officials, and workers to come into your country. Just also now to pin focus on workers, we know that to work in many of these countries, you'll need a work permit. So you have to ask yourself, and many of these countries or federations have front teams. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of visa are they applying for when they're coming into the country? Are we going to create a special class of visas or work permits or special passes for these persons or not? How are you going to go about that? Because again, when you're hosting, the countries don't want to act in violation of your own laws. So what the practice is that they create a different kind or unique form of visa to accommodate the people who are going to come into that country, especially to work on that tournament. It is also similar to volunteers. Many of these tournaments, the workforce that you see in the stewards, people who are guiding you on where to be at what time, how to access the stadium, Many of these are volunteers, and some of the volunteers, let's say now for the forthcoming World Cup, they've already made calls for volunteers, and people could be there as early as already. Actually, people are already there. The first set of volunteers is already allowed to enter the US, subject to immigration protocol. So you have to ask yourself, how do these volunteers also go on with their business, and what forms of visas do they acquire, and how do you protect them while they're in the country? And of course, you look in that because someone may come as a volunteer, but with other ideas or other intentions. So you also have to find the balancing act. For the World Cup that is coming, 2026, seeing that the US, to kind of balance this immigration challenge, has what they call the FIFA Pass. That is unique for the fans. They had to communicate on what then will be for the other volunteers, the workers, the officials, and the athlete. But at least for the fans, they have the FIFA Pass, which does not guarantee you entry to the United States, but also it quickens up your entry into probably if you put it another way, it cuts down the time that you need for you to get a visa interview for those who are familiar with those kind of interviews. Also related to that is that often when these tournaments are going to happen, on the sidelines, either before, often before or shortly after the tournament, there are executive committees of those associations that sit before or after the given sports event. So you also must accommodate for those officials to enable their entry into that tournament. Also, if you could again refer to the World Cup, or we have a unique situation where our president was earlier banned from that's the FIFA president, earlier banned from entering also the US under the past Joe Biden administration. So questions were lingering also whether probably if Uganda qualified, then we would have to be in the tournament if we did qualify without our federation president. But at least that has been clear because we didn't qualify, easier route. But then we have to ask ourselves if there's going to be an ExCom meeting, or at least a meeting of the members of the General Assembly of FIFA before after the tournament. Then of course that means that our federation president will not be able to go there. Probably the fallback position would be anyone to represent him. But of course, that is not the ideal position that a country would wish to find itself in. Then the other is on the IP rights. The IP is very important because this is the cash cow. This is the cash cow for these federations and tournaments. So most of the money comes on in addition to the sponsorship. So that's why you see that probably they're not so nail-bent on probably even the money from the ticketing to access the stadium, but they're very, very big on their IP rights. And most of, largely, the biggest piece of the cake is from the broadcasting rights. So you must ask yourself, how are they going to broadcast? Who is going to be the official broadcaster? And how are their broadcasts protected in your city, hosting city, or if it's a country, then of course in your territory. So this is very problematic for Uganda. It's something that CAF had to turn a blind eye on for the CHAN tournament. But our current Sports Act says that the broadcasting rights fall are properties of the federation or association that is responsible for the given discipline. That means that literally the broadcasting rights for the previous CHAN and the forthcoming AFCON, as the law is in black and white, do not belong to CAF, but belong to FUFA, which is erroneous because from a CAF standpoint, the broadcasting rights have to belong to CAF because it's CAF then tells them to the broadcasters. Because now, the broadcasters will have to ask a question. Of course, if you work for a broadcaster like MultiChoice or SuperSport, ask a question because in law, we know that you cannot sell what is not yours. So if someone wants to buy the broadcasting rights for the AFCON that are forthcoming, can they legally buy them from CAF? Yet in this territory, those rights do not belong to CAF, but belong to FUFA. That is something that we even brought up even during the earlier stages of the consultation stages of our Sports Act, which was a bill by then but wasn't paid keen attention to, and I know CAF raised eyebrows of that. They found a compromise during CHAN. I don't know whether they'll be able also happy to find and a compromise during the AFCON, because in law we cannot say what is not yours. And in Uganda, those broadcasting rights do not belong to CAF, but they belong to FUFA, as if you read our law in black and white. So it's something that our legislators need to look into, or at least probably then plan on how they'll find a compromise. They'll find a compromise between CAF, the broadcasters, and our laws come after 2027. So the other one is ambush marketing. Ambush marketing is where someone who's not a major sponsor would then, let's say the major sponsor for the AFCON is Total Energies. But again, there is somewhere, Shell designs a unique way of also appearing in those tournaments. This is something that is that the sponsors and broadcasters are very much sensitive about. Give you a practical scenario that happened just in the just concluded CHAN tournament. Of course, MTN was still central to sponsoring FUFA, who are the federations running or managing the Uganda Cranes, who are also participants in the just concluded CHAN tournament. And of course, one of the biggest, or if not the biggest, faces from the Uganda perspective in that tournament was Alan Okello. But Alan Okello also has a current running agreement with also his individual sponsor, who is Tecno. And Tecno wanted Alan Okello to make adverts for them, because of course he was selling big time during the CHAN, and the goals that was putting through and the performances that were very beautiful to watch. But so in complying with the request by the individual sponsor Tecno, then Alan Okello had posted a video of a Tecno phone, but the Tecno phone was in also a product that was being sold by in unison with Airtel. So of course, MTN raised eyebrows on that, saying MTN raised eyebrows and says, look, we're sponsoring you, but we are seeing the biggest face of the tournament advertising a product that is being touted by our direct competitor, which is Airtel. Because now these ambush marketing things become very critical during these tournaments, because all eyes are on that given city or that given game, the superstars. So you must be alive to what kind of equipment are they having, what kind of devices they want to put on headsets. You've seen them coming with headsets, but if the headset is made by Apple, or let's say it's by Samsung, but again, there's Panasonic is also a sponsor, then that will raise questions. If now our kit is being made by Janzi, but again, probably have an official sponsor who is probably Adidas, then Adidas asks questions saying that, why are we seeing this team putting on kits made by Janzi, yet we want to take up this market using this tournament? So you must be able to also be alive to deter any ambush marketing strategies. But ambush marketing often is you cannot do much, but you have to warn the general population and the third parties before the event, and also have to monitor what is going on during a given event, and also be able to address it before the sponsor is disgusted by whatever would be going on. And some of the culprits for this ambush marketing that they use are the journalists. Good enough that we have our friend Ismail, is that people use, and they use during the CHAN, is that they would use a journalist. So a journalist would go and probably get an official CAF logo, put it on, probably they're shooting a video of a training, they put an official CAF logo, and on the official CAF logo, probably the official sponsor, of course, was Total. But again, now the journalist also has his own sponsor, or the media house has its own sponsor, so that there is a CAF logo appearing at the same time, let's say, with the logo of Starbucks. But again, the official sponsor is Total. So that will be a question that then Total will be asking, that why am I seeing the journalists having the logo of CAF putting out a broadcast that has a logo, a trademark of a direct sponsor? You should be able to reach out to the journalists very, very quick and be able to find a middle ground, or ask that your brands are removed, or at least the brands of the competitors are black, so there's no any form of ambush marketing during the tournament. Of course, that ties into what we've already shared about the brand protection, because if there's ambush marketing, then the brands are protected and the sponsorship agreements are also equally respected. Then the procurement services, those who are CHAN, at least on day one, you might have observed that we didn't have catering services because, of course, as being
kindly,
a first-time major host.
Housekeeping, just time. Wrap up in the next 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes.
All right. All right, thank you. Let me just try to wrap this up. Of course, procurement of service providers, you must make sure that the procurement services align with the local organizing committees and the event organizers, and that, of course, these service providers meet the international standards. Let's say if it's a drink, it's not harmful to anyone, and of course, it's not conflicting with the sponsors. Also, probably the major service provider that you look into is the ticketing. Ticketing has been quite a challenge, but I think we are solving it slowly. But also, whoever is providing the technology, or even the payments and acquisition of tickets, should be someone who could do the job real quick. Because if that is not done well, that's when you see crowds powering up at narrow entry points, leading to a stampede, which of course is a risk to the life and limb of the fans. Anti-doping, already Isma spoke about it. Of course, you must be alive that in these tournaments they're big on anti-doping, especially if tournament is of and football may be long, but let's say you have athletics. Let's say if you have let's say immediate one of the protocols that if someone publishes one gold, if you're hosting a major tournament, then they have to go in through the anti-doping system. They have to be tested so that whether they are really genuine champions. That is the current practice. Also, you must, but also that is addition to any random test that the organizers or WADA, because this is an independent body, and doping agencies, or could be at global, regional, or at national level, can come at any time to carry out this test. So you need to prepare the teams and the players that they are likely to that when they see someone from anti-doping, they are welcome to that person. And also similar to that is that also the persons can easily be identifiable. So you must give them the tags so that they are protected for, and they're given access by security and not also welcome by whoever they opt to subject to testing. So into that also the infrastructure must help you. You must have facilities that support the samples not to be contaminated, but also be well preserved, so that by the time the sample is tested, it is a true reflection of the sample as it was collected. Dispute resolution. Of course, many of these tournaments have have ad hoc panels. It wasn't here at during the CHAN, but if it's in athletics, many of these ad hoc panels must be available, because anyone can raise a complaint at any time before a medal is given out, and a dispute should be resolved in the quickest time possible. So as a hosting nation, you need to create room and facilities and lay down clear procedures on how these ad hoc panels will be set up, and how any person who may have a dispute could be able to raise the questions, and the same be resolved in the quickest time possible, which even at times happen in just a couple of hours. Yes, political and coming in. So one of the things that, of course, it's very hard to divorce politics from these kind of tournaments. We've seen when our neighbors Kenya were hosting the WRC, we saw President William Ruto taking a ride in those machines. So, but although you cannot divorce politicians from such tournaments, because it's heavily their money, and of course, like it's broken down, that the big decision makers, you must make sure that you balance, not excluding them, but also them leaving the federations or the sports bodies to run their show. So no decisions should be made from a political bias, or at least when a politician is forcing, let's say if it's an ad hoc panel, how a decision should be. If you're trying to frustrate a team politically, probably to access security. So you must make sure that although you have the marketing support of the politicians, that support does not graduate into what may be termed as interference of the given sports tournament that is ongoing in your country. Then the other one, last one is insurance and coverage. Of course, some events, like I said, you already made a commitment fee, but you may have events, things may occur that are largely beyond your control. So what the practice is that, let's say if you pay that money and probably, let's say COVID happens, a disaster happens, we are going into a political situation around the region, or we are already into a political situation around the region, probably there's political unrest and these tournaments cannot go ahead, then the insurance cover after you lose whatever commitment fees that you made, or if any repercussions that may come along, especially from the broadcasters, if you're not able to host the event or do as expected in a timely manner, then the insurance coverage will come up and safeguard you from the repercussions of such failures. Yes, that is it for me, OJ, for now. I'll probably take the questions on later.
Okay, there were a couple of questions. I don't know if you saw them in the chat section. Unfortunately, can the person with can you scroll up? There was a question from one Posi Katongole. Just scroll up so that people they can address that question very fast. But I'd also asked you a question about who's in charge of the sport. The fight between NCS. Oh, go down. Oh, that one, yes. The fight between NCS and FUFA on money. Maybe you can answer that one. But then there was a question from one Posi Katongole. Good morning and thank you for the presentation. A local company is incorporated in EA as hosts of AFCON, prohibited from undertaking the construction of the stadia. That was the question. Yes. But also importantly, maybe this one also, I'll leave it to Oluka maybe to avoid wasting time. The debate between who owns the broadcasting rights or who owns the IP rights between CAF and FUFA. Since intellectual property rights is supposed to be territorial, but here is CAF saying that we own this thing. You can also address it, but also Mr. Oluka will address. So quickly, about 3-4 minutes, address those questions.
Yes, on the question about the construction companies, there is no limitation because construction is undertaken by a country. So it's the country that makes the decisions on makes a decision on which company will take on the construction. What CAF will be, or what will be only concerned about is that the quality of the stadium. Does your infrastructure or stadium meet the prerequisite standards that they are concerned? As to whom puts up the stadium, there is no limitations to that in law. On who own about between CAF and FUFA, of course, the hosting rights, like I said, they're either given to a country or a city. So often not a federation. The federation does not take it up. Although in practice, it would be good that the country, let's say, of course, the NCS as an institutional legal, as a creature of our Sports Act, should be able to augur well with the federation. That there is no contradiction, because you may do something as NCS and blind out FUFA, yet FUFA could have insights from FUFA could have helped you probably not miss out on certain things, especially on the standards, because FUFA has, of course, a bit of more technical expertise in the world of football, probably beyond NCS. So you would want that in practice that both institutions augur well. But as to the hosting rights or the rights to dictate proceedings to the country or to the city and not the federation. The federation will go ahead and play and or participate in the tournament as any other federation that will be invited to participate in the said games. As to who owns the IP rights, depends on which laws you're looking at. As I said, there is a contradiction. When you look at the CAF statutes, everything, the AFCON and the CHAN belong to CAF. That is the CAF statutes. And of course, that is the CAF statutes. So, and of course, FUFA has to be bound by that. But now our laws say that if you read the Sports Act as is, it says that now again they belong to FUFA. But FUFA is also now a member of CAF, and it cannot act in contradiction with the CAF statutes that are above FUFA. That is why often when this happens, similar to the changes that we made in the anti-doping provisions in our act, is that countries come up and make these implants, they make changes into their laws, or they amend their laws specifically to suit the international standards or the standards of these international federation associations. So that's what, and that is what I think should happen, that the minister should be able to pick up this contradiction and align on them. Probably they could make a special proviso. It's there's of course granting these specific hosting rights to the international federations, but also generally we could improve our statute because it's the international standard. The international standard is that these broadcasting rights are for international federations and not the local federations. So we should burden our laws to give better safeguards to these international federations to make them more welcome. Because now already, of course, we are already aligned with CAF. But if, let's say, it's another sports discipline, let's say it's wild aquatics. If they look at this and have no special proviso for themselves, they'll also be discouraged from being an international tournament into Uganda because of this concern. So I think generally we should just be able to amend our act to accommodate the fact that these IP rights or broadcasting rights may belong to an international federation that may not be necessarily a local federation such as FUFA.
Thank you, Timothy. I believe it's a segment that lawyers were largely eagerly waiting for, and thank you very much for a very erudite submission and presentation. Perhaps if there are questions at the end, we shall come back. I think Mr. Oluka will also pick it up from there when it comes to IP and broadcasting and sponsorship rights later. But at this juncture, we have Honorable Shadow Minister of Sports, Honorable Kayemba Solo Geoffrey, who's online, and we'll give him about 10 minutes to tell us about the status of Ugandan sport in light of CHAN 2024 going into AFCON 2027, especially because it's parliamentarians that appropriate the money or play the legislative role that ensures that we have some money for some of these projects, and so that we can be able to enjoy our sport. Honorable, I hope you're online. In about 10 minutes, really, you can just brief us on some things, what you've done and what is at stake, or what are the projections are, so that we can have that viewpoint from you. Unfortunately, Honorable is not yet ready. So perhaps when he is at the end, we can give him some time to talk. Okay, I can see a couple of questions though. Construction and the PPDA Act. That's a very good question on PPDA. Quickly, in 1 minute, Mr. Kaja, on construction, should the PPDA Act take course in a country like Uganda? Why UPDF? In 1 minute.
Of course, I think this is generally an issue that is in the world of construction locally. We had ULS just had a training on that. Is that the PPDA Act makes this type of bidding or bidding for this type of work open, but we also allow that in the country Uganda there is a presidential directive on giving preference to the UPDF to take up this construction. Of course, they did. People thought that they did a good job on Nambole before they saw what Suma could do. But now that is CAF does not interfere in such scenarios. But locally, I think even ULS should take it up as a membership, because it's not only limited to sport. Generally, the UPDF is taking up a lot of construction projects from that are being funded by government, because there's a presidential directive, which that directive, if you look at it in black and white, contradicts with our PPDA Act. But I think this is a society issue that's wider than sport, but generally in construction. And I think we as members of ULS should be able to bring it up to the executive and the powers that be to reconcile these positions and let the PPDA act as was, without interference from the UPDF. If UPDF is good enough, let them bid and win fairly and squarely, as opposed to them coming off the back of a presidential directive?
Our presidential directive is legal. Don't answer that question. Let's move on to Honorable. Honorable, you're online. Kindly, let's hear from you. A few words, 5 minutes. Status of Ugandan sport in light of CHAN 2024. What are you hearing in the corridors? You're the ones in the corridors of power. What do we have? Do you have another stadium coming up somewhere? Ugandans have been complaining that Hoima Stadium is quite far. Do you have one that's going to be the city center?
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen here. It's a pleasure to be here to share with you this morning. It's my first time to be in such a meeting. I pray to God all goes on well. I've had my brother Kaja presenting, and I was happy with his presentation. Everything was okay. When you look at CHAN, how it was done, I see it was just the starting point of Ugandan sports to host such a big event. We got some milestone, because remember, we wouldn't get stadiums like Hoima and Akibwa that are under construction right now, because it was one of the requirements that CAF said, if you want to host such a tournament, we need this and this and this. So CHAN was like an eye-opener or a curtain raiser to AFCON that we'll host in 2027. We had a lot of challenges, especially with in fights between FUFA and National Council of Sports, that's the Ministry of Education, on whom should do this and who should do this. You see, we had to have a very good opening ceremony, but the ministry organized the one at Kololo, where they even got songs of the World Cup and the rest. They got balls that were not for CAF and the rest, but it was their will. That's what they decided to do. And the Kololo is not a playing pitch, because it's not a stadium where they made it, but it was in between. It was between them and FUFA. We had to get the same opening ceremony at Nambole. At our first match, I think we were playing the opening match that we had in Nambole. We had to get a very good opening ceremony, as we saw in Kenya and Tanzania, but due to the differences between the leaders that time, we failed. We just played on, the match started, and we didn't get the mileage that we expected as Ugandans, the artists, the creative industry, and the rest would get. But all in all, our boys played well. The fans stand up in big numbers, and we're sure when we go to AFCON, we shall achieve the best of the best. This was like a rehearsal to go back and see whether the play is ready to be presented at the National Theatre or not. But I think we got some things we have to start on when you're playing AFCON. I'm Geoffrey Kayemba Solo. Sorry, I will do an introduction first of my names. I'm a member of Parliament for Bukoma Simbi South in Masaka. I'm also the Shadow Minister for Sports and also a licensed FIFA football agent. I've done this job since 2009 up to now. We have seen many of our players go to Europe, others in North Africa, others in South Africa. So we still have a dream that one day, one time, we're going to have a Ugandan player that was born in Uganda, grew up in Uganda, that will play in the best top 5 leagues of this world.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Important point is again the infighting. I hope we can overcome that infighting at some point between those in charge of our sport. Thank you very much, Honorable. It was great listening to you. Let's move on to Mr. Andrew Oluka, a partner at Muema, who's going to do a deeper dive. I don't know how deep it will be into IP and media broadcasting rights, etc. I think there was, again, fights, NBS Sport versus FUFA TV on CHAN, etc. So what are the legal gymnastics around that? I know Kaja had gone into a bit of them, but Mr. Oluka will take us further into them. Thank you very, very much. The floor is yours, Mr. Oluka.
Good morning, colleagues joining us online, my fellow panelists who have done a good job. Isma giving us a very good background of how FIFA started for all my interaction with sport. I'd always had a hint there was a lawyer involved, but I didn't know the idea was the brainchild of a journalist. So it's good that we have a journalist amongst lawyers to discuss football as a sport. As introduced, my name is Andrew Oluka, and I'm supposed to delve into a deeper analysis on broadcasting rights vis-a-vis intellectual property in hosting such a mega event. I even asked how deep it will be. It's only as deep as the consumer's perception. But I'll try and do a good job. So broadcasting rights. While thinking about the topic that had been assigned to discuss, something was playing back in my mind. Many years ago, I remember being crouched over a transistor radio, listening to the Sekafa Senior Challenge that was happening, I think, in Zanzibar, won by Uganda through a goal by a one Issa Sekatawa. It was a headed goal. It was a header. And much younger then, I remember the memories and the emotions are still alive, because one of the things that I remember about that tournament was having to line up along Port Bell Road, because I remember the team returned via a ferry through Mwanza. So we lined up as kids via Port Bell Road. I grew up in the neighborhoods of Luzira, just to watch the team drive from Port Bell into the city center. That is my that's my earliest memories about broadcasting. It's no wonder that I still find myself in a broadcasting studio, where sometimes I sit in at a sports show, the locker room on Radio 1, or occasionally when the guys on the silver screen, the ISMAs of this world, get to invite me to their TVs to share. And interestingly, oftentimes it's sports. It's related to sport. I keep being asked where I find the time to amass all that sports knowledge, and my answer is always very simple. Sport comes very easy to me. I can only imagine what I could have done in a better sporting economy if sport comes easy to me. But to the topic that I was assigned. Juan Antonio Samaranch, former IOC president, once said that sports and TV is a match made in heaven. Sport and TV is a match made in heaven. We've seen how much sport, how much television, and in a broader sense, broadcasting has impacted on sport. Today, an Arsenal fan could literally name the entire reserve team of Arsenal, not because he has personally interfaced with them, but because of the power of broadcasting. You can access some of this information either by watching a YouTube video or subscribing to Arsenal TV. When you get there, you get content related to Arsenal and stuff like that. That is the power of broadcasting the power of broadcasting in sport. It's probably the biggest revenue stream. Actually, I will scratch that. Broadcasting is the biggest revenue stream in sport. So what is broadcasting rights? I know Timothy has gone on has delved a bit into what broadcasting is. Hopefully I can do a better job than, or a more in-depth job than what Timothy did. But broadcasting rights largely are exclusive rights sold by a sports organizer to a broadcaster to relay a particular sports activity in real time. So to answer the question that Timothy has been ping-ponging as to who owns the broadcasting rights of the AFCON between FUFA and CHAN, the broadcasting rights usually belong to the organizer. So in this particular case, CHAN is the organizer of AFCON, not CHAN, sorry. CAF is the organizer of AFCON. So therefore, the broadcasting rights out of AFCON belong to CAF. FUFA and Uganda are simply the host country for an event organized by CAF. So I don't see how the FUFA Act the Sports Act of Uganda will interfere with the intellectual property rights of AFCON which rightly belong to CAF. I hope that puts the argument to bed. So like I said, broadcasting rights are intellectual property rights that are signed by the organizer of a sports event to a broadcaster for purposes of relaying a particular sports event. In this particular case, it will be the AFCON, to the masses out there who will watch either via television, YouTube, or whatever other medium that will carry the tournament. Obviously, when you talk about assignment of rights, it involves, because this is a training tailored for lawyers, a lawyer's input is necessary for purposes of contract negotiation, perfecting of the contract documents, eventually enforcement or execution of the contract, and basically managing the contracts throughout its existence. Unfortunately, many of us legal practitioners from Uganda might not get to interact with the broadcasting rights for AFCON, because knowing the way some of these international organizations run, these have already been sorted out. I know that, for instance, CAF usually has a broadcaster for a period of about 5 years before they open it up again. So, and it also makes sense for the broadcasters that they get a lengthier period for purposes of recovering the money they invest into acquiring this right. So it's not likely that you'll find a broadcasting contract for such major events or for such major entities that will run for a year. Otherwise, you would have chaos. I know that, for instance, the Premier League renews its broadcasting rights after every 5 years. So, yeah, these ones have already been sorted out. The broadcasters are known. The contracts are already in place. It's about now execution of the works. But yes, there is an involvement of a lawyer during the negotiations, contract execution, perfection of the documents. There is work for lawyers there. Whether we will get to do it at the AFCON is a story for another day, but I think we will have a role to play as lawyers, especially when there is need for subcontracts. Okay? So, what intellectual property protection is accorded to broadcasting rights? Of course, where there is a right, there is need to protect the right. As lawyers, we understand that rights protection accrues to one who has a right. So, as a broadcaster who has the rights to carry a particular product, in this particular case, a sports product, you are afforded protection. And that means there is a particular law that looks out for you. In this particular case, it's the Copyright Act majorly, because sports events, once aggregated into an audio-visual package or montage, are considered audiovisual works, which then are protected under the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act. In Uganda, we have one, and it offers a protection for such works for a period of, I think it's 50 years, yes. Uganda was not the pioneer of protection of audiovisual works. The International Convention on Performers and Producers of Phonograms and Broadcasting Organizations, the Rome Convention of 1961, does provide exclusive rights to broadcasters to authorize the rebroadcast of their products for a period of 20 years. So there has been a historical legislative development towards protecting broadcasters. Okay, it's not a new thing. The only challenge now is that with the development in technology, there are new innovations which are almost rendering the current legislative framework obsolete, because it was not envisaged in 1961 that, for instance, we'd be living in a digital era where you could carry your audiovisual works and watch them wherever you went. At the time, the authors of the Rome Convention were looking at theaters, were looking at staged plays and things like that. today we have streaming services, we have televisions, and the whole works. Those were not taken into consideration. But hopefully the laws will develop and grow and evolve with the new evolution of broadcasting services. The same treatment, i.e. the protection to broadcasters, can also be found in the TRIPS agreement, which is like the parent intellectual property law within Africa. IP practitioners will understand this. Although there is an ongoing debate as to whether live sports events can be copyrighted. Of course, you can't copyright the way Lionel Messi is going to dribble past or chip to score a goal past an Arsenal goalkeeper. But when you package that entire game into a dispatchable or a distributable item through TV, through streaming, it is that packaging, that montage is what is protected. Whereas you might not protect how a particular player is going to dribble, how an athlete is going to race, and things like that, what is likely to happen, and things like that. When you put it all together into one package, it is that now acquires protection, and those are what have largely been known as broadcasting rights. Broadcasting rights have been monetized through advertisements. A lot of advertisement works goes into broadcasting rights. We've seen, for instance, Isma here will know how much money is spent on Super Bowl every year, from just how much money is generated on from Super Bowl every year from just advertisement revenue. One of the highlights of Super Bowl is the halftime performance. It's probably bigger than the game itself, unless you're an ardent American football fan. But many of us look out for the performing artists. How were they dressed? How was the stage constructed? And this is something that happened for maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, just a period of 15 minutes.
Yeah, the entire the halftime show is 15 minutes. Most performances last anywhere under 9 minutes. Anywhere under 9 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Isma is my numbers guy. Whenever I'm trying to remember something sporting, and I can't, I always know someone to call. He will tell you the year Sachin Tendulkar, for instance, first batted for India. I am very sure. You probably forget his son's birthday, but he will remember the date Sachin Tendulkar first batted for India. That's how keen Isma is with sporting years, numbers, and figures. But yeah, the Super Bowl event that I'm talking about lasts 15 minutes. That is setting up the stage, artists' costumes, dress up, and everything, and you seeing them perform probably 3 or 4 songs roped together into one. But all this is because of the power of television and broadcasting, because television and broadcasting will not allow for the halftime performance, which is like the highlight of the Super Bowl, to exceed the 15 minutes. Television time or broadcasting time is prime time. It is very expensive, and it has got to be managed well. Something that I wish as a country, hopefully with us hosting AFCON, we will learn to manage that kind of that time. I attend a lot of sports events, and I see time is one of the things that I usually complain that is not well managed, especially when you get into awards ceremony. There are usually speeches before awards. I wonder why the climax of the tournament might be watered down by speeches, because everyone is waiting to see the winners lift the trophy, but the awards take more, the speeches take more time. But yeah, hopefully we can learn to manage time. But also, broadcasting rights are monetized through sponsorship. There's a lot of sponsorship money that goes into trying to buy that space for a particular event. We will interact with a lot of this when AFCON comes here. Eventually, we will see how many international organizations or companies are interested in coming to advertise within our borders, just because they want to get a share of that pie, which is to appear to appear in a broadcast. There is a lot of money that is spent on pay-per-view. Most of us watch our sport here through a pay-per-view channel, one way or the other. Even those who stream will stream because they have subscribed to a particular channel, and that particular channel will acquire those rights through a pay-per-view channel. Of course, there is a subscription model, which I've just hinted on. Many of us subscribe to Netflix. Today, we do not have to go to a movie store to rent a movie. You just pay about, I think it's $13 to Netflix and buy internet, and then you can stream as many movies as you want, diverse from all walks of life. And Netflix is not the only one. There is Amazon Prime. Incidentally, most of these streaming channels have also bought into sport. If you are a subscriber to Amazon Prime, for instance, you do not have to buy a set box to be able to watch your favorite sporting team play in the EPL. You can just you can stream through Amazon TV. Of course, all these are mechanisms through which broadcasting rights have been monetized. Okay, I hope we have not lost track of what broadcasting rights are. But when AFCON comes here fully, we'll begin to understand. Incidentally, I was involved in one of the fights that involves probably the biggest broadcaster on the continent. This is MultChoice. When MultChoice, under the SuperSport flagship, was broadcasting the Ugandan Premier League then, the contract was yanked from right under our feet. We ended up in court. Well, I still think Ugandan sport would be in a better place if MultChoice had stayed in Uganda, but that's my argument, or that's my opinion. But yes, again, as you can see, demonstrated involvement of lawyers in broadcasting rights. I have been a beneficiary in some of these shenanigans that have needed legal support when we in that long drawn court battle with the USL and FUFA for the rights to telecast the Uganda Premier League. But well, that's still business for lawyers. So what are the benefits of broadcasting rights to sports events? Like I said, media broadcasting rights are one of the largest, if not the largest, revenue stream that goes towards sport. A lot of money is spent by broadcasters to acquire rights to telecast and relay sports events across the world, and that money is broken down when they sell their rights or assign some of their rights to other broadcasters in regions where they might not reach. For instance, most of us who watch the English Premier League might think SuperSport has the rights to the English Premier League here in Africa, but you'll know, if you don't, that those rights are acquired through Sky Sports, which is a British broadcaster. But because Sky Sport might not be in position to appreciate and understand the territory that is in Africa, they assign those rights to SuperSport. Other broadcasters include BT Sport, Bain Sport, depending on territories. So you realize broadcasting rights are territorial or assigned or sold to particular territories, depending on who is able to reach that territory better, or who can be better placed to maximize those rights in that particular territory. Media and broadcasting rights create employment opportunities. Again, I would say I got to get some instructions thanks to broadcasting rights. My brother Isma here works for a media company, and he will tell you, if it wasn't for the media company, in fact, one of the jokes we have with Isma, I've known Isma for quite a long time. One of the jokes we keep having with Isma is, I keep asking him what his economics degree has done for him, and he still has no answer for me. But yes, he's gainfully employed thanks to media broadcasting rights. Media broadcasting rights will help promote local content. A lot of Uganda and the other East African countries that will be hosting AFCON will be highlighted on international stage once the tournament starts proper here. We will hear stories about Muzungu Boda will not be the only one talking about Rolex in Uganda or his experience regarding riding a boda. Very many other people will get introduced to the concept that the quickest way to get around this town of ours is by way of a boda, because our cultures, our ethos, the things that make us who we are will be highlighted and spotlighted thanks to the broadcasters, thanks to media broadcasting rights. Because I don't think they will only concentrate on the football, they will want to understand who are Ugandans, what habits do they have, and part of those stories will be carried world over. Of course, broadcasting rights stimulates creativity. I will refer again to my brother Isma here. He's probably one of the better writers I have come across. And he's very good with words, especially when he has to write them down. Speaking might be neither here and there, but when he means to sit down to write something, it comes from a particular place of interest, and this creativity is stimulated by the mere fact that he's able to put out his ideas out there without necessarily having to go around stopping everyone and telling them about, like he was saying, and appearing to be knowledgeable about sport, or why a particular team took out a defender for a striker. If he had to organize a crusade to do that, imagine how many of those he would have to organize. But because of the power of broadcasting, he's able to put his ideas down by way of pen and paper. Sometimes you will, most of you will have seen him on TV. You will have listened to him on radio. I have had the chance of sharing a radio studio with him over time and discussing sport. So whereas we might look at sport only through the prism of a lawyer, of how do I go to court about something, about a particular matter, you can also participate in broadcasting by appearing on TV, for instance. Ivan here has done a number of TV gigs where he is hard to educate the masses on, especially he used to, I remember I think at the time when the National Sports Act was on the floor of Parliament, and then eventually to its signature, and post that, Ivan was literally running a week-by-week commentary on what was happening in that act, commendably for him. And I'm sure, and I absolutely, because of your knowledge and your understanding, but also because of your passion for everything that is sport. I don't know how often you find Ivan or Isma or myself texting on a WhatsApp platform discussing the NBA, for instance. The NBA is the basketball in the US, which happens at very ungodly hours. Most of the games are at very ungodly hours, but because of the passion, you'll find Ivan texting about what LeBron has done or failed to do, or how he's impacting on winning at the Lakers right now. Of course, usually comes from a bad place. He hates the Lakers and LeBron. But yeah, but all this is enabled by the power of broadcasting, because without that, Ivan and I and Isma and many of us who like to follow our sport would never have been able to discuss and understand sport the way we do. Of course, broadcasting does not come without challenges. There are some challenges that have faced broadcasting rights or broadcasters. I don't want to bore you with the rest of the challenges, things like expensive to acquire rights and things like that, but anyone who has interacted with internet and the phone and has tried to consume content will understand that the major challenge facing broadcasting right now is signal piracy. From illegal streams, illegal downloads, interference with the signals and things like that. There's a lot of signal piracy that is happening right now because of the growth and evolution of ways of broadcasting. Like I said previously, you would have to sit behind a TV to watch a game of football or to watch a game of basketball. That meant you're either in a bar or you're at home or you are in a place where you could access a TV. Today, you don't have to do that. I have seen people in behind traffic lights following an EPL game on their phone or on their screens as they drive. That is how much that's how much evolution has happened or has happened to broadcasting, that today you don't have to be seated behind a television to be able to watch a particular sport or a particular event. You can, with the right tools and the right apps, you can easily follow it on your phone, okay? Gone are the days where the only way we could, for instance, listen to or get to consume a football game that was happening, let's say Uganda was playing in Kenya, by tuning to our radios. Today, we have, you don't have to go there, you just have to have your phone, subscribe to a particular app, and then you're able to consume that content. However, because of that, there's also been a lot of illicit broadcasts or relays of these events. And like I've said, so many illegal channels are now benefiting from running broadcasts or relaying broadcasts of events to anyone who can access them through whatever platform or channel. Signal piracy through illicit devices which bypass the security measures that are set up by the persons who have the broadcasting rights. We have unauthorized retransmission of broadcasts where someone aggregates it somewhere and then retransmits it. So you'll find someone, for instance, in let's say North Africa, gets to see a goal scored in the EPL maybe a couple of minutes or seconds later than someone, say, in East Africa. Not because they are not living around the same time, but because someone else or someone supplying them has to first aggregate what is happening and then redistribute. And those are some of the ways signal piracy is hurting broadcasting rights. There are also network intrusions where hackers particularly will go onto a particular broadcaster's channel and hack into it and tap into the broadcast and then relay, okay? So, and of course, this impacts on the broadcasting industry financially, because broadcasters pay a lot of money to acquire the rights to be able to relay some of these, to relay most of these sports events. So if someone is tapping it off you at a free and then redistributing it, they are tapping into your market, which eventually means you'll be losing that market. And that impacts on your revenue. So the lawyers will be asking me, so what do we do in the event now that we are going to host AFCON? And you've highlighted some of the challenges that are affecting the broadcasting industry. What do we have to do? As a lawyer, is there any form of, because most of us lawyers are trained to think, we're still trained the olden way where we think everything must end in court. However, that's not the only way of dispute resolution. But I'm going to delve into I'm going to highlight some of the court actions that have been taken to try and stop infringement on broadcasting rights. Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, in his book Shoe Dog, once said, business is like war without bullets. And oftentimes, the battleground in business is the courts of law. So yes, there have been a number of decided cases that have tried to call to book or to protect the rights of broadcasters. This very year, the courts in France, in the landmark case of Canal Plus, suing together with the French Ligue A, or Ligue 1, if you may, sued VPN providers. And the courts in Paris found that VPN, by enabling illegal streams and illegal streaming sites to bypass the security features that are set up to protect the rights of these broadcasters, was indeed facilitating illegal streaming of the French Ligue A. And in its decision, the French court issued an injunction against VPN from facilitating such illegal sites. I can't wait for when a Ugandan lawyer takes up such action and actually comes out successful, or I can't wait for when a court in Uganda actually recognizes that by facilitating somebody else to break a crime, to commit a crime, you are economically as culpable as the criminal themselves. This is not the only case that has been taken to court regarding broadcasting rights. In 2025, this very year again, there was an arrest of an Anglo TV creator, a website founder who was carrying out massive illegal broadcasts of football matches and other high-profile events like Formula 1 in Argentina. This guy literally had people subscribing to his website, and by subscribing to his website, you could access the Premier League, the French League, the Spanish League, Formula 1, NBA, and in turn, you didn't have to pay the holders of the broadcasting rights to be able to access this content. This arrest signified one of major crackdowns in illegal streaming. This happened in Argentina. In the case of Rogers Media Inc. versus John Doe, where a Canadian court issued a widespread injunction to block again ISPs. This one was against ISPs being internet service providers, to block ISPs from granting access to pirated streams. Again, like I said, signal piracy is one of the biggest impediments to broadcasting rights. The Canadian court sought to stop internet service providers from actively allowing pirated sites from accessing internet on their platforms. The John Doe in this particular case was using illegal streams to access the NHL, the National Hockey League. Those guys, anyone who has interacted with someone from Canada will know it's one of the biggest things in Canada, the National Hockey League. The NBA and the Premier League were some of the products that the John Doe in this particular case was relaying. Of course, someone will say, but Andrew, those are all incidents that are happening in more developed jurisdictions. What about us here? Well, we fear not. We are not left out. MultiChoice Kenya and UEFA instituted a case in the High Court of Kenya against ISPs, again, internet service providers, where they secured an injunction to block ISPs in Kenya from granting access to particular sports events to pirated websites. Okay? So this is right down the neighborhood. Kenya is one of the host countries for AFCON, so we've seen that Kenya has tested the waters in media broadcasting. And the courts in Uganda here can borrow a leaf and help protect broadcasters' rights, because we will definitely see a lot of infringement on broadcasters' rights once the AFCON comes here properly. It's why it might be far-fetched from us right now is that we've not, as a country, had the privilege of hosting such a mega event, as Ivan likes to call the AFCON, and which I tend to agree. I don't think Uganda has hosted a sports event of its of that capacity, and this could be a start of something, growth in Ugandan sport. So, colleagues, lawyers, there is a lot of work for lawyers that comes from broadcasting rights, from protecting broadcasting rights, okay? And when the AFCON properly comes to Uganda, we will understand the magnitude of these works. Ivan, I hope by that I have been able to delve a little deeper. It's unfortunate that real-time examples from Uganda are not readily available because we've not tested these waters much. But I want to believe that with AFCON, we are going to test these waters, one way or the other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, examples, they are there, but perhaps in terms of proper jurisprudence, maybe an issue. For example, I mean, the matter you talked about, the multi-choice exam, I think we had UBC, NBS at some point. There's one ongoing, which Kaja and I are involved in. Someone has claiming audio rights over the English Premier League in the courts. A couple of others that have been resolved out of court and settled. So
that one of media rights, I've seen it because of my relationship with broadcasters.
It can be earth-shattering when it eventually comes out.
It keeps coming up at the start of every EPL season.
Really?
You will see letters flying around warning radio stations.
The day the decision comes out, and I hope the judge does a good job, whichever way it goes, to be really, really monumental. For me, this broadcasting thing gets a bit controversial because, again, back to the origins of sport. Sport was at first touted as a public good, but here are capitalistic interests that have taken root. Where is the balancing act? If I go to my car streaming site as a poor man, this era of the internet is open, I cannot afford DSTV or whatever, and I'm like, but no, I also want to watch AFCON, or I want to watch the Premier League. And then the official licensee or the guy with the rights comes for me, hammers me, or takes me to court or arrests me or whatever. Is there a balancing act? Is there how, as far as, I think it's called net neutrality and open internet is concerned, as far as we the public are concerned? For example, I have a feeling AFCON may not be on UBC. I think it's what happened in Chan. I think there were all the games there, or there were few and far between. I think there were a few games. So that means that the villager in my district there, in Palisa, may not be able to watch AFCON. So where is the balance here? How do we balance out these things? That would be my question.
Oftentimes, governments are given a discounted rate to acquire broadcasting, to acquire rights to broadcast these major events at a discounted fee, provided they are carried on their national television carriers. I think for me the bigger picture here would be most of these, not most, all these national television are carried on pay-per-view televisions now. So you will ask yourself, what happens if a particular pay-per-view provider does not have broadcasting rights to this particular tournament? Does for instance, will UBC be taken off that pay-per-view platform because they are not the carriers for the tournament? For me, that's the bigger question. I think that the balancing act might be difficult to find here because we've allowed capitalists take over the sport, and they will argue that we invest a lot of money to acquire these rights, and we need to recoup what we've invested in acquiring these rights. So if we permit everyone, every sundry, to find ways of carrying it, then it loses meaning as to why we should invest a lot of money to acquire rights to telecast these sports events. But that's a very good question, and how we achieve the balance, you and I will probably not have the answers to that.
Isma, you're chipping, okay?
Yeah, I've been burning to say something that the times have changed. In the past, growing up, we listened to our sport on Radio Uganda and UTV, which is now UBC. But if you look back then, all the sports was done by national broadcasters in other countries. There weren't private players at the time. We used to watch the French Open. We used to watch athletics, the Golden League, which is now the Diamond League in athletics, the Champions League, and all these tournaments. But the feed that UTV was giving us used to come from CFI, Canal France International, which is a government broadcaster in France, and this was ongoing across Africa. Now, what has changed is that with the media liberalization of the 90s, you have so many private players who have come in and invested money, not only in buying the rights, but even in the broadcast equipment, broadcast infrastructure, where if UTV, for example, had to go to Nachivubo and show us the Sekafa Club Championship of 1999, I think the final Yanga beat because we had a terrible goalkeeper in the Villa goal. That's the Ramadan Elengesa. I can't forget his name.
That was my first interaction watching Ugandan football live, because my dad is an ardent Villa fan, so that was like the first time he took me to a stadium proper.
Yeah, so when UTV would do that, and I don't think there was even an arrangement. All they had to do is talk to Sekafa, and they agreed they were not paying any money, and neither were we who are watching. But these days, it's turned around. You have Sky Sports, okay, the parent company is called BSkyB, and they are investing a lot of money. They've set up equipment. Now, what has changed besides the broadcasters, and Andrew, I like when Andrew mentioned the SuperSport and the Premier League. What SuperSport have is now a feed. The Premier League are shooting their own games. They've set up an entire broadcast company called Premier League Television Productions that has 2 broadcast vans at all the 20 Premier League games, Premier League stadiums for the entire season, and they never leave, which is what the UK government would have done under the former Prime Minister, for example, John Major, when BBC would have his content for us in all these countries. Now, Premier League are shooting their own content, and now they are saying, we are creating content for you. You have a platform, you need to show this. So what Ivan calls capitalism is the difference between a football player of the 1980s making £500 a week to £350,000 a week. I think that's what has changed.
Thank you, Isma. So you're trying to say the capitalists are very important for us, in order for the sportsmen to be able to reap from their talents. Okay, thank you very much. The Q&A, the more or less comments, but I think we shall address them at the end. Let us move on to the next segment. In line with saving the best for last, we normally talk about money, lawyers, I don't know what, government sending money. But many times the people who actually bring joy to us and make us happy. I mean, you and I do not go to Nambole to watch Mr. Magogo. We go to watch Kalida Ucho, we go to watch, there's a new Muzungu, what's his name? Obita. Obita is the guy who has made us follow his team on Twitter. The guy who plays the right back. So those are the guys we go and watch. So that many times the conversation does not go to who are the real stakeholders, who really matter. And at this juncture, we have a very able panelist who will help us discuss this particular part. An active player, though for some reasons, for one reason or the other, he's not active yet. He's not playing currently, but he will tell us why. He has interacted with, for lack of a better word, I used it earlier, the ills of sports governance in this country. So he has a very vantage point regarding that. And he has been a sportsman. He's one of the very best who have played rugby in this country. So Mr. Ivan Magomu is going to discuss for us athletes' perspective into the gains, if any, for sports from the hosting of mega sports events. And of course there he will discuss athletes' welfare and the other things that come with being an athlete in this country. Ivan is a lawyer. He's a club captain of Pirates Rugby Club and is a director at Mashariki Sports. Ivan, over to you. Former captain apparently, he'll tell us more.
Ivan, and you'll know that one of the reasons is neither active or retired is because of capitalism and fighting for his rights.
Ivan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Good morning, colleagues, members. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to share with you what an athlete goes through during these campaigns, the mega campaigns. My name is Ivan Magomu. A lawyer, of course, by profession. I'm a director at Mashariki. Yeah, like Ivan said, I've been interfacing with a lot of capitalism, and this has put me in trouble, mainly because I try to advocate for what's right for the athletes and how they're supposed to be remunerated and all that. Now, I'm going to talk about this from an athlete's lens view. And I would say, of course, hosting mega events feels like Xmas, but sometimes it usually benefits the adults and forgets the kids. Like Ivan mentioned, we are the core product on the pitch. Everyone who supports a different sport, be it football, soccer, netball, rugby, they come to, watch the athlete, the player, to entertain them, pay their monies, and then live with the memories and go back home with all the bragging rights and all. So today we are going to look at the promised gains and the actual gains for the athletes. For the athletes during the hosting of these mega events. Potential gains, of course, we have infrastructure that comes up, all these stadiums, Suma, you have now the Lugogo indoor being thought about. We have the Mandela National Stadium that has come up. All those are potential gains of these mega tournaments. Funding and sponsorship that comes from, the government and other partners for visibility. Grassroots and youth development. Athletes' welfare and contracts. This majorly looks into things like contracts, medical insurance, image rights, and all that. Then international exposure and the role of what? Them being role models. What actually happens on the side of athletes is when it comes to the remuneration, is usually the we call it the short-term bonus money, whereby there's a lot of excitement about a tournament happening. There's visibility, there are numbers, but what happens is what an athlete actually takes home after such a mega or successful tournament are usually peanuts. I'll give an example. We hosted the Rugby Africa Cup last year at Nambole, a successful event. I'm talking in terms of rugby now, it was a major event. We did really well, and whoever was outside, given the numbers and all these promotions that were going, would think the athlete left and went home a very happy person. In actual sense, we only left with $300. That is $100 per game. So that is the short-term bonus money that comes with these mega tournaments that I'm talking about. The other one is, of course, the infrastructure is up, running, but it is costly to maintain. Most of the athletes actually don't even get a chance to go and practice on these stadiums that they've set, and hence does not really improve on their trainings and all that. The long-term welfare of the athletes is not thought after. When we ask these concerned people to offer contracts to the players, they start playing hide and seek, and you find that they make most of the players sign contracts that don't actually favor them. During these tournaments, the red flags are always there to be seen. There's always red flags that we athletes see, but are rarely worked upon. The red flags, there I think I've mentioned one, that is the white elephant stadiums. These are all big, we've invested in a lot of resources, but we don't think about the, what goes in terms of maintenance, access of these stadiums. And I can tell you, I think to access Mandela National Stadium, I think there is a fee you have to pay, so it becomes costly to the stakeholders. We see now government getting into, going to obtain all these loans to finance such huge budgets, and at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer who suffers, and you can even have the budgets of the sports cut down because of such loans. Usually we have conflicts during these mega events in terms of sponsorship, image rights, contracts, like Timothy mentioned earlier. And also I think what the Sports Act provides for is you find the rights belonging to actually the institution and not one that should be belonging to the athlete, because these are their image rights. They're entitled to benefit from them both economically and see to it that they can make so much money off it. Can give an example, like we have a star now in Alan Okello. He's getting all these endorsements, and I hope his agent or lawyers are doing a good job, which I think they are doing, because he's entitled to benefit from his image and image rights. I mentioned about forced signing of contracts. There's the silent forcing of players to sign contracts. Most of these happen where they just call players to a room and say, hey, we have a contract here. It says A, B, C, and D. At the end of it all, you'll be earning this amount of money. So most of the players, sadly in Uganda, are not learned, most of them, so they can't read or interpret the law. And what they'll do first is run to the page that has the money or the payments and look at the terms, and forget to look at what is in the contract, or they cannot look at the contract cover to cover. So those are the red flags that usually affect, and once you come out and try to be vocal about it, then you land into what they call trouble, and you face all sorts of bringing the sport into disrepute, because you're talking about what should be right, what should be done, and all that. So those are the red flags usually that we athletes notice and see during these mega events. And actually, when we try to come and talk about it or try to raise a concern, then you're blacklisted and look like a trouble causer, which is wrong. So we have too many legacies that live only during the opening ceremonies, but at the end of the tournament, the benefits to an athlete do not really trickle down. Ivan mentioned and said it's commercial, in a Ugandan term where people say "Olituli nyiramudiru," not knowing that what is bringing actually people to watch these games are the different athletes. Players from Senegal, someone is excited to see maybe Sadio Mane playing at the AFCON, excited to see a local homegrown hero like Karim Watambala, and they're able to pay that money, to go and watch the player, but at the end of the day, the player is only left with crumbs, which affects the economic rights under Article 40 and so on. So in a nutshell, I don't know if I've been too brief, Ivan, but interest of time, that is what I can say is, do these mega events really pull it off for athletes? To a smaller extent, yes, but to a larger extent, we are merely used for the show. And after that, when the tournament is done and everyone moves on, it's the athlete that's left, especially those that have sustained injuries and all that. I'll give you another live example. I have a friend of mine, he's a captain. He's called Isma Watenga, local grown home hero from Bale. He had an ACL injury, I think, some time back, and it has been really a struggle to see that he gets the much needed medical attention because of the tendency of use and dump, and them not being able to safeguard their rights in their contracts and all that. Yeah, Ivan.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Magom. I think you brought out the major aspects, really. I mean, we do not go to sport or to these stadiums to watch our sports administrators. We go to watch the... Isma used to like using the word mercurial. The mercurial fly half, Ivan Magom. I think I must have learned that word from Isma. And this is like what? I think Magom must have been like in... either high school, S65, and Isma was already using that word to describe the man. So really, it's quite sad. But for me,
Ivan, there is Ojakol. There is a generation of players that I watched from high school, and I take a lot of pride in them and how well they've become on the pitch. Ivan, Philip Wokorach, Alfred Bijik, Jude Keremondo. Some have moved on. So when I first watched these kids, I went to office and I was almost jumping because it was a Sunday and Chadondo was a bit wet, yeah. I don't know whether they sustained any injuries that day that have not been treated, but they were just gliding. They were playing rugby on skates. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how good they were, and that's how bad they made the opponents look. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I mean, also ties it to, I think there was a comment there about how we ensure that our athletes do not go into obscurity after their careers and poverty. So, but for me, Ivan, what are you, especially you who has a certain level of education as a lawyer, is there a solution to this? What are there any mechanisms you have or any ideas you have, or what are you doing to ensure that athletes can be able to properly benefit from their talents and be able to, you know, if it's I don't know, $50 million of government, athletes get at least 20 million. So how are there any mechanisms? Are there any safeguards that you think that you as an athlete can take the lead as far as ensuring that you can be able to benefit?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ivan. The first one would be, which is happening, advocacy. You have to advocate for the athletes' rights because under the Constitution, under Article 40, they're entitled an economic right. And right now, the ILO Dialogue Forum on Decent Work recognized sports on decent work, recognized sports as work. So an athlete right now should be able to benefit of their talent. The first one would be advocacy. Then when advocacy fails, we go on to the next one, which would be, of course, enforcement. Ivan here is handling, Ivan and Timothy Kaja and another colleague are handling my issue. I have an issue in court in regards to judicial review. Ivan Magomu versus the trustees of Uganda Rugby Union, where I was banned without a fair and just treatment. And from the works we've done so far, there have been amendments to the constitution of the rugby union, and they're starting to get aligned because they know we now have a legal framework that allows us to do what we are supposed to do. The other thing, as a lawyer, and my advice would be to other lawyers, befriend these athletes. When you go to watch them play and stuff, advise them, go and emancipate them about their worth, about their rights. Pick interest in these new fields, sports law, intellectual property, copyright. The other fields are too crowded, they're too crowded. So as lawyers, we need to pick interest, especially the sport each of us desires or loves, and see to it that we can give back one or the other. My colleague here mentioned that he's an agent, and he's just one deal away from changing his life. Imagine an example from Dr. Lawrence Mlindwa. He sold Farouk Mia, and the money he got from Farouk Mia was able to push him to have all those developments at St. Mary's in Chitende. So as an athlete who has had the benefit of going to school, playing sport to the highest level, continentally and here, my advice would be, especially to the administrators, that they need to set up mechanisms, frameworks that not only favor them, but favor the athlete, because without the athlete, there's no core product.
Ivan, maybe to supplement, and I want to pick up from the question that was asked by Patrick Kajumba, who said something to do with a compulsory savings scheme. to help athletes, because we've seen so many stories told about our athletes post their careers who retire into poverty. And those stories, if you sat Isma here, you probably need a whole 1 week for him to tell you stories of athletes who were once something and now are begging on the streets of Kampala just for survival. I have had, and whereas Patrick Kajumba suggests a compulsory savings scheme, I have had an opinion which I've shared within the rugby circles and actually basketball circles. One of the biggest, or one of the most important associations, and you will see the Uganda Law Society, if we didn't have a binding glue to keep us together, will probably disintegrate. I've always argued that there is a need for instance, rugby players to form a rugby players association, to bring them together, or a union, to bring them together for collective bargaining. For as long as you don't have a collective voice as athletes, we're going to keep having stories of isolated stories of Ivan, who stood up for his rights and said, I will not sign this particular contract because it does not promote my interest as an individual, and they will get ostracized the way Ivan was banned from the national team. Okay, but imagine collectively, the national team players came together and said, look, this contract does not promote our interests as athletes, but rather benefits a particular funder. So because of that, we are not going to sign it. Without the players, without the athletes, sport won't exist. If rugby players laid down their tools today, we will not go to the rugby stadiums to watch rugby. I remember vividly when La Liga had a different revenue share policy where Barcelona and Madrid were taking the bigger chunk of TV revenue. It took La Liga players going on strike, which delayed the start of the La Liga season, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, for almost 3 weeks, for La Liga to sit down with the players and clubs and renegotiate the revenue share. Or even the NBA lockout that led to the collective bargain agreement that now is being, because the benefits of this is it allows either side to bring their issues on table and they are incorporated into the governing laws. What we see is administrators sitting in a boardroom and coming up with what they think is the right governing structures for the sport, which eventually is skewed towards promoting what the administrators want, less what promotes the athletes. So I will urge Ivan here, since he's semi-retired from rugby, if you sat together and made it a personal goal and said, look, I want to start a rugby players association for purposes of collective bargain. It might not necessarily be for purposes of fighting administrators, but imagine if rugby players came together collectively and went to an insurance company and asked for insurance against injuries, for instance, because the insurer is going to look at numbers. If they see you're a unit that brings together, let's say, 150 people, and you can find ways of working together, it would be easier for an insurance company to say, for this particular kind of injuries, I'll fork out the what? The medical bills. So we'll not have players playing injured, which eventually ruins their lives. Okay? That's my take.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I don't know how it had skipped my mind, but the Players Association has been cooking. We call it cooking. It has been in the pathways, but of course you meet challenges from the administrators themselves. Like I mentioned earlier, the pressure we've put on them now led to the amendment of their constitution that should be in line with the International Olympic Committee constitution in terms of having athletes representatives. So moving forward, the next AGM as rugby, we are going to have an athletes representative who will be able to sit with the ExCom and present the players' needs, which is one of the first steps towards achieving our goal of being united through an association. And you never know, tomorrow would fully grow into a whole working or a whole labor union as athletes in Uganda. Because like we said, the ILO recognizes athletes as workers, and like Council has said, Andrew, if we would get organized, I think FUFA has a players association. Yes, organized. If we can pick a leaf at other sports federations, you never know, tomorrow we may have a labor union championing rights of athletes in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Magomu. And the earlier you unite, the better. And I know, for example, in Uganda's labor laws, I think even one person is enough to get a union. So for me, that could be the magic one. I think the other challenge is really the dispute resolution system and mechanisms. Under the Sports Act, I think it's fuzzy. That so-called arbitration mechanism there is fuzzy, as far as I'm concerned. But even for the matters that were perhaps filed before it's coming into force, or the matters that have gone to court, I think ULS could have or should take up the mantle of engaging the bench. Athletes' disputes are a bit different, and a judge handling a sports dispute as if it's a normal dispute and taking 2 years to pronounce judgment is really, as far as I'm concerned, not helpful to the industry. So we need, I don't know, this dispute resolution is a serious challenge for us.
In the 2 years you've been
locally.
In the 2 years you've been in court, Ivan has retired from rugby.
Thank you for that. Okay, I've seen Q&A, there are comments, but let's just go through them. Maybe perhaps our panelists. Kindly go to the Q&A and see what our panelists can add. It was a comment, but if you guys have anything to speak, you can. Bweri Gerard has 2 comments. We appreciate government is funding sports nowadays. Is funding, I think that's what he meant. But it could be better if the government could construct stadiums in every region of the country. Then secondly, Uganda Football Federation should improve in marketing our players outside the country, so that we can have many players playing in Europe, in Premier League. Let me have 2 comments. I don't know, Isma and Andrew, and then we move on.
I just want to start with the comment about the federation marketing players. The only way the federation will market players is by organizing events like AFCON, which will attract agents to come and see these players and probably take them out, because the federation in its mandate cannot actively go and tout a player to a particular club, of course, unless done under the table. The idea of the government constructing more stadiums would be welcome, but I cry out for more private sector involvement in sport, because even if the government constructed stadiums, for as long as there is no sustainable activity in these facilities, then they would become white elephants. Thank you.
Thank you. On the second one first, Andrew, China actively do it, but China is run different. They signed a partnership with La Liga to have their players at Levante and Villarreal. Eventually, I know Chinese players made the Villarreal first team, even if it's now 10 years since that partnership, about 10 years since they signed. So there's something that federations can do. However, I think marketing and branding globally, where it has succeeded, is done by an expert on that. Now, the people in federations, I think you'd be asking too much. That's not their expertise. Luckily for football, the biggest brand that we've known before Ronaldo was David Beckham. But if you understand Beckham's branding journey, you'll understand that it's largely about the wife he met. Because before the 90s, sportsmen did not have, in Europe, of course, there was already Michael Jordan and Nike and Tiger Woods on the other side of the Atlantic. But when David Beckham started interacting with the Spice Girls and saw the kind of stuff that you are doing with their branding, that's how I eventually got into that space. So maybe sometimes it take one person. Now, I've always challenged my friend, Dennis Onyango. I think he jumped onto this marketing trail much later in his career. There's a time when I felt he was already big enough to endorse and build a brand. Now he's jumped onto it. Onyango is now 40. But all these deals he's got with GSB and National Lettering and Gaming Board have come post 35. But I could argue even 10 years ago, Onyango could move a needle and someone could take notice. By then, people like Tony Maweja were playing, who are not as big brands as he was on a billboard for Renzori Mineral Water. So I think there's something that we have not mastered. And maybe I owe Andrew. It's a space that I feel I need to make a contribution. And I've told Andrew before that I need to sign some of these guys into, because how do you build a brand? Our colleague Clive Chaz, who you might have heard about, started with this basic thing of creating Twitter accounts and Instagram for Alan Okello. And so Alan Okello has gone now. He has headphones with black. He has a telephone endorsement and this kind of things. And it's a start. Now, what Alan Okello owes us is for him to keep the performances and perhaps a kind of discipline that does not drag these companies in the kind of troubles like Tiger Woods got into. Yeah? That is one. The other one, the infrastructure. I think with this AFCON, we are going to make a step. The stadium in Hoima is a 20,000-seater. The one in Lira is also going to be 20,000-seater. If we also have, all those facilities are coming with a basketball venue, which is about 2,000-seater. If we have the Lugogo Arena too, that the CDF is spearheading, hopefully that also comes up. You know, for us sports people, sometimes we forget the legalese. We want the facility. We've had an argument with Ivan about regulation of academies, and I've argued that all we need is to have players. How they get to Arsenal, I don't care, but provided they get there. Sometimes, and partly because I'm an economist, the end justifies the means. If my son is going to make it to Manchester United, I think I'm going to be the first person to alter their birth certificate. Yeah? If they want a 17-year-old and is 28, I'll make him 16. That is how sports people work. Yeah? Sometimes that's how it happens. But I think eventually when we do Hoima and Akibwa, it won't be long before there's something in Arua and Kabale. My only challenge is, many of us think about stadiums and think Nambole. But what Uganda needs is that tiny 5,000, 3,000, the Philip Omon, the one in Lugogo, that is the stadium that would work where Ojakol comes from, where I come from. That is a kind of model that is sustainable, that even the community, even if they paid 3,000 or 2,000 to get in to support Idodi FC, where I come from, that money is sufficient to sustain the stadium, because we may not have the resources. Like countries like Morocco, for example, stadiums are entirely run by the government. But I don't think that model works when you go around Africa and you see places that have hosted AFCON, and we have to be very careful. Like in Gabon, you go to the city of Oyem, and the stadium is now a potato garden most of the time, most of the year. So those things, that balancing act, government today takes care of Nambole, and will most likely take care of Hoima and Lira. What about if we build smaller facilities, 2,000-seater, where if we are playing a Masaza Cup tournament in Mwenge versus Chenjojo, yeah, those Masaza in Port Poto, at least we have the 2,000 paying 5,000 shillings, and on a day we can get 10 million, and that is sufficient to run the stadium. What government normally can do for us is to pay the salaries of the people who are employed by the facility, but the daily maintenance has to depend on the ability of Buhimba United getting people into Butema Royal Park in Hoima. Thank you.
Fantastic. Mr. Setuma had asked about whether the presentations will be shared. I think they should be shared through ULS. I think Mr. Kaja, who made the presentation, will share his presentation. But also this recording will be on the YouTube channel of ULS. So I think you can always find this there. I do not know if anyone has any questions. We can unmute you and you ask. We can take about 3 of them. You can kindly raise your hand. We can take about 3 of you. Any comments, questions, and we close the session. Hopefully our panelists will be able to answer, or even Mr. Kaja was online. Any contribution from about 2 or 3 of you? You can raise your hand and the host will unmute you. Okay, I do not see anyone who has raised their hand or is requesting. Host, is there anyone? Oh, there's someone. Kindly let them speak. 1 minute, please. We should only take a maximum of 3. Okay. Yeah, let's move on to parting shots. Start with Mr. Kaja, who's online. Mr. Kaja, parting shots.
Yes, thanks, Ivan, and thanks for my fellow panelists and the colleagues who have tuned in. My parting shot would really be that as lawyers, we should just keep really our eyes open and also be more aggressive in looking out for these work opportunities that sport presents us with. Of course, just warn ourselves, don't think that you just bulldoze your way into the field. The field is well guarded by an old guard that Magom has a thing or two about. So don't think that it will just be a knock and the door open for you, but nonetheless, you have to keep pushing. These opportunities do arise. And there's just an interesting phenomena is that back home you may be locked out, but the beauty about sport is that the space is open to do things beyond our borders. So if you find that the old guard is not letting you in locally, you can still make your way onto the scene through the international gates. Those are my parting shots.
Thank you, Mr. Oluka.
I just want to re-echo probably what Timothy has said and emphasize that, in my opinion, sports is the world's biggest economy, and there is space for every lawyer to participate in sport. It might not be directly, it could be indirectly, but we need to actively find ways and innovate ways of making this sector lucrative for us as practitioners, through advisory, through I have done a few cases where I've dragged sports bodies to court, and many more of those will open up the floodgates, because I can assure you there is a lot of lawyer need in the sports industry. Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, Mr. Dakaba and Mr. Magoma have stepped out, so let's wrap it up. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, for taking off your precious time. I hope, besides gaining the CLE points, you've also learned a thing or two about sports, the sports industry, and how to get in. So I hope for me we can be able to properly bring value to our sportsmen, and also get ready to tap into the opportunities that will come with AFCON 2027 and other sports events around the world. Thank you very much. At this juncture, I close the session and wish you a very lovely rest of the day and a great weekend ahead.